Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nolan Buchanan. California is known for its beautiful natural attractions, particularly in El Dorado County, which borders Nevada and is close to the well-known Lake Tahoe. In this rural region lies the small town of Greenwood, home to over 1,000 residents. Tourism is one of the main economic sectors here. On the morning of Sunday, September 13, 2015, everything seemed normal until an urgent call to 911 reported a large fire in the forest area. Immediate action was necessary to prevent the fire from spreading. Firefighters quickly arrived at the scene and began extinguishing the fire, but the flames rapidly surged to heights of 33 feet. Fortunately, there was a stream nearby that helped extinguish most of the fire. The next step was to check the area to ensure that no one was injured and to assess the damage. During the survey, it was found that a small building measuring about 55 square meters had completely burned down, with only the foundation remaining. What caught the firefighters' attention was a strange smell that was later identified as the smell of burning flesh. Initially, the firefighters considered the possibility that a pet might have been trapped inside the house, but they quickly ruled this out when they found a human skull and a burnt rib cage. Sadly, it became clear that the fire had claimed someone's life. The grim discovery was promptly reported to the police, who faced a challenge. Parts of the house were still on fire, making it impossible to conduct a thorough examination. They had to wait until the fire was out and the temperature dropped. As the police stood outside observing the fire, they reached some preliminary conclusions. They determined that the house was clearly not the owner's official residence since it was situated in a remote and isolated area. Additionally, the house was very small, measuring less than 60 square meters, and it was likely a vacation home. Through their ongoing surveillance, the police suspected there might be more victims beyond the remains they had found, but they could not confirm this. To gather more insights, they decided to examine the nearby area. The total area associated with the house was 8 hectares and was owned by someone. On the property, they discovered a large trailer and an old pickup truck, which were registered to a company. They were able to check the license plates to identify the vehicle's owner, who might have been in the house during the fire. The search was quick, revealing that the truck and trailer belonged to a company called Buchanan Construction, owned by an individual named Adam Buchanan. Adam lived 250 kilometers, 155 miles, away, which is about a 3-hour drive. This information supported the police's suspicion that the house was merely a vacation retreat for those looking to escape the city. However, it remained to be determined who had been inside, Adam himself or someone else. Late on September 13th, 2 bodies were discovered in the burning building. The name of the company owner provided detectives with their first lead in the investigation. The police were tasked with checking on the well-being of all members of the Buchanan family to see if they were at home. They arrived at the family's residence and soon noticed a white Ford pickup truck in the driveway. A young man named Nolan Buchanan emerged from the house, surprised to see the uniformed officers, and asked about the reason for their visit. The police did not disclose the reason right away, wanting first to determine who else was home. Nolan announced that he was Adam's son from Adam's first marriage. He stated that his father, Adam, had gone to the country estate with his fiancée, Molly, and their 8-year-old son, Gavin, for a short vacation, and they planned to return that evening. The officers needed to identify the bodies found in the house, as they might belong to the Buchanan family members. Nolan stated that there should have been 3 people in the home, but only 2 bodies were found in the debris. To determine the identities, further examination was required, but the wreckage was still too hot for a thorough inspection. The next day, September 14th, the El Dorado County Police planned to speak with Nolan again to gather more information about the victims of the fire. The officers met with Adam's parents, who expressed their concern that their son, the owner of the burnt house, had not reached out to them. During their conversation, it became apparent that Adam, who had some experience with repairs, had been working on fixing the house. Although the building was connected to a generator, there was no electricity at the time of the incident. However, there were gas cylinders present, suggesting that the fire could have started accidentally or been set intentionally, both possibilities remained open. Afterward, the police continued to search the forest area and gathered some evidence, though it was insufficient to advance the investigation. They could only access the ruins of the burned house on September 15th. Investigators hoped that the objects discovered inside would provide crucial information for understanding the incident that occurred there. During the excavation process, they discovered a third body, which attracted a lot of attention from the investigators because there was a round hole in one of the bones. This discovery suggested that something sinister had happened within the house. Accidental death was ruled out, and the possibility of murder became the primary focus. There was a strong belief that the fire had been set to destroy evidence of the crime. However, questions remained about how the incident occurred. Was it a botched burglary, or was a dangerous killer responsible for the deaths in that area? While the victims had not yet been identified, there was a strong likelihood that they were all members of the Buchanan family. To confirm this, the remains were sent to a forensic expert for an autopsy, with instructions to identify the bodies and determine their causes of death. It was discovered that one victim had been attacked in the torso, and another victim had a bullet fragment found in their vertebra. Unfortunately, the second body was too severely charred to yield much information, but the presence of cartridges nearby strongly suggested intentional murder. The remains of a third individual, identified as a skull fragment, confirmed that the person had died from a weapon attached to the head. The medical examiner revealed that the victim was a child. Detectives verified their suspicions about the identities of the deceased, confirming they were members of the Buchanan family: Adam, Gavin, and Molly McAfee. All three of them had been attacked. The police faced a difficult challenge in informing the victims' families about their tragic fate. The families had held on to hope until the end, struggling to accept the reality of their loss, and nothing could truly prepare them for the heartbreaking news. Upon learning what happened, the relatives were left devastated and grief-stricken. Neither Molly, known for her cheerful and friendly demeanor, nor Adam, who cherished his partner, had any enemies who would wish them harm. Although Adam had experienced a difficult marriage and raised his son Nolan from that relationship, this alone seemed unlikely to lead to murder. Marriages often have their ups and downs, and many couples find themselves separated or divorced. After parting ways with his first wife, Adam continued to care for their son, Nolan, hoping that Nolan would one day take over his construction business. After overcoming his emotional pain, Adam decided to seek a new relationship with Molly through a dating website. Their first date took place at a Starbucks coffee shop. They discovered they had much in common, including Molly's experience working in a construction company. It was love at first sight. Adam wasted no time in inviting Molly to move in with him, and she happily agreed. Their life together blossomed, and for 10 years, they enjoyed a deep and fulfilling partnership. Both of them dreamed of having a child. A few years after they met, Molly became pregnant and gave birth to Gavin, who became a half-brother to Nolan, Adam's eldest son. It seemed like a perfect family picture. However, family members noticed that their relationship was not as stable as it appeared. Adam and Molly often argued. Although Molly never filed for divorce, she would occasionally take their son and stay at her parents' house for a few days. It was also revealed that Adam and Molly liked to hunt near their country home. Since both owned weapons, investigators speculated that during one of their arguments, one of them might have grabbed a weapon, leading to a tragic outcome. The investigation raised concerns. If the tragedy stemmed from a conflict between the couple, there should have been a weapon found next to one of the bodies. The police carried out a thorough search of the scene to find the weapon involved in the incident. The possibility that the weapon had been badly damaged or almost completely destroyed in the fire was considered, but the search for it continued. If the weapon had been found, it would have supported the theory that Adam and Molly were involved. If not, it would suggest that an outsider may have harmed the family. Over 5 days, forensic team members methodically sifted through the ashes of the house. Their thorough search ultimately yielded no weapons, leading to the conclusion that Adam and Molly were not the perpetrators. It was also clear that 8-year-old Gavin was innocent, indicating that a fourth person was involved in the incident. The absence of a murder weapon was troubling, as it meant the investigation had to restart from square one, without any suspects or evidence. As is customary in such cases, detectives meticulously examined the family's history and relationships. While they had already interviewed Adam's parents, they had not yet spoken with his eldest son, Nolan. It was time to ask him some questions. The 16-year-old boy, Nolan, shared that after his parents divorced, he felt very anxious but tried to stay strong. He lived with his grandparents. When asked why he didn't go on vacation with his relatives, he explained that he felt it was his responsibility to take care of the house and garden while his father and stepmother were away. According to Nolan, they got into an old pickup truck and headed to Greenwood, the same truck that the police had seen near the burning building. Adam chose to use the service vehicle rather than his own because it was loaded with stones he planned to use for landscaping at his country home. The investigators asked Nolan if he was aware of any issues with his neighbors. He replied that someone was regularly growing banned substances on his family's remote property. This caught the detectives' attention, particularly because, in this part of the United States, violent crime is often associated with the cultivation of banned substances. The conversation with Nolan continued, shifting to the family business. He revealed that his father's business had been struggling lately. The company was facing significant challenges in the United States, with its employee count dwindling to just 5. Financially, the situation was critical, and the debts related to the business were quickly accumulating, according to what his father reported. Fortunately, the investigation had gathered valuable information, allowing the case to progress. On September 18, 2015, investigators began looking into a conflict that arose regarding the cultivation of illegal plants in that area. It was revealed that there was indeed a disagreement between Adam and his neighbors. He confronted them, demanding that they stop growing and harvesting the tree on his property, threatening to involve the police if they did not comply. Detectives believed that this ultimatum could potentially escalate into a desire to harm Adam's family. However, no one knew which neighbor was involved. To gather more details about the situation, the investigators decided to explore the neighborhood on foot. One of the investigators had a breakthrough when he met a man who admitted to arguing with Adam over the cultivation of an illegal crop. The argument was intense, but they managed to resolve their differences. However, Adam's business was facing a financial crisis. On September 17, police conducted a raid on Adam's company, confirming Nolan's claims about its dire situation. Debts exceeding $30,000 were putting it at risk of bankruptcy, leading to layoffs of some employees. It came to light that some of these former employees were very unhappy about being let go and might have motives related to the murder investigation. Investigators sought and obtained a warrant to access the company's premises and review its documents. The following day, September 19, local high school students participated in a community cleanup just a mile away from Adam's construction company. During the cleanup process, a student discovered a small bag hidden behind a bush, with a weapon next to it. The school management promptly informed the police, who examined the bag and found Adam's identification inside it. This led to a new theory: the victims were murdered, the weapon was found, and the killer may have taken Adam's documents in order to obstruct the investigation. The discovery was crucial, revealing that someone had traveled from Greenwood to confront the family before returning to Benicia, where they abandoned the bag and weapon. It was likely that the perpetrator was from the local area. Detectives were convinced that the culprit was one of the employees from Adam's construction company, as evidence was discovered just a mile away from the company's headquarters. The weapon and the items found in the bag were well preserved, so they were sent for examination. After obtaining a search warrant, investigators began examining the company's buildings, focusing particularly on financial records that could reveal the names of potential creditors. During the investigation, detectives discovered a surveillance camera at the company's premises, which was a welcome sign. The camera was aimed at the center of the parking lot. Knowing that the family had gone to the countryside on Friday, September 11th, the investigators decided to review the footage from that day to see if anything unusual occurred. In the video, they spotted a large trailer that had previously come to their attention near the family's burned home. The footage also showed Adam and Molly loading pallets of decorative rocks. However, a critical moment changed the course of the investigation. Although it initially seemed insignificant, the vehicle towing the trailer was not the old white pickup parked at the burnt house. It was a white Ford that had been seen in the driveway of the Buchanan home when investigators first questioned Nolan. He had falsely claimed that his relatives had left in the old pickup. With this revelation, the police became very interested in his story. Molly's mother, Susie Slankard, had a suspicion that something was off when she noticed a Ford parked near the burnt house, which was later replaced by an old car. Concerned, she called the police after a strange incident during a family dinner earlier that week. Nolan, who had been questioned about the country house, made an unusual remark, claiming he was no longer just an heir but now the owner. Although his father, Adam, had founded the company, Nolan insisted that the rights had transferred to him. Nolan explained how he planned to take control of the family business and sell its assets to prevent its downfall. It was surprising to hear such statements from someone so young, especially after losing his family. Susie, puzzled by Nolan's odd behavior, contacted the police to express her concerns. As a result, the police summoned Nolan for another interrogation. They did not charge him with any crime or demand explanations. They merely took his statement, in which he spoke vaguely about his whereabouts on the day of the murder. During the second questioning, Nolan provided more details. He claimed that he spent Saturday alone on September 12, 2015, attended church with his girlfriend and her family on Sunday morning. Later, he met friends at the shopping center and then returned to see his girlfriend. The investigators allowed him to continue without interruption but asked once how he had paid for his shopping and date expenses. Nolan said his father's bank card was at home and he used it. Following this, the police requested a search warrant for Adam's house, anticipating valuable evidence. They hoped to seize the bank card to review any transactions. The warrant was granted, and investigators rushed to Adam's house, where they found the card in the upper part of a safe. They also noticed a Ford parked in the driveway, which had dirt lodged in the wheels. It had just rained, and according to the police, the dirt on the wheels might have been washed away or at least significantly reduced. Additionally, a construction company's surveillance camera showed that Nolan had lied about the old pickup truck that the family was supposed to have left behind. The Ford was confiscated for further analysis, making Nolan the main suspect in the murder. Even though he was already under police scrutiny, gathering enough evidence to prove his involvement would be challenging, especially since he was a minor accused of murdering his family. The suspicions were confirmed when the investigation began with laboratory tests on the murder weapon, which revealed Nolan's fingerprints. This indicates that he possessed a weapon. However, further evidence is needed to prove that he went to the scene where his family was present. Detectives examined the bank transactions of Molly and Adam in the days leading up to the murder. A transaction took place on September 11th, just as the family was getting ready to go to their country house. A payment of $36 was made at a restaurant in a small town along the route to Greenwood. When investigators contacted the restaurant management, they confirmed that they had surveillance cameras. The timing of the transaction allowed detectives to establish when the family should have been at the restaurant. In the video footage, they identified the same white Ford towing a large trailer, which had been seen at the crime scene and had been searched and confiscated a few days earlier. Law enforcement officers discovered a receipt for a transaction on Friday, September 11, 2015, which raised questions about the details of the order. The receipt indicated that several sandwiches and 4 drinks had been purchased. Since the Buchanans were a group of 3, the question arose, why would they order 4 drinks? Investigators collected the bag and other trash found in the car to reconstruct the menu associated with the receipt. They also reviewed the trash discovered earlier in the investigation in front of the vacation home. Upon comparing their findings, investigators confirmed that the Ford pickup truck had indeed been in Greenwood. The next bank card transaction occurred on Saturday, September 12th, at a vending machine in a bar approximately a 30-minute drive from Greenwood. As in the first case, investigators visited the bar to review the surveillance footage. The video clearly showed Molly, as well as a woman nearby withdrawing $40 from an ATM to cover expenses. It was clear that Molly and Adam were present, as their car was visible in the footage outside the bar. This was significant because it confirmed that Adam had his bank card with him that evening, and it remained with him throughout the weekend. After determining the time Molly and Adam left the bar, detectives tracked their route. A restaurant along the way had a camera facing the highway, making it a valuable resource. Investigators reviewed the footage and verified that the Ford truck was headed toward Greenwood around 2:30 a.m. It was widely accepted that Adam and Molly were in the vehicle. However, at 3:30, the same pickup truck was noted returning. Detectives became convinced that, at that moment, Nolan was in the car, driving home after committing the act of killing his family and disposing of their bodies. On September 13th, new transactions were reviewed, including purchases at McDonald's and gas stations. The records indicated that there was no food for 4 people in the paid order. It was noted that the Ford was still parked near the burned house and was driven by Nolan. The detectives checked with the bank and confirmed that only one card had been issued in Adam's name. It was clear that this card had been used between September 11th and 13th in Greenwood. With solid evidence in hand, the detectives returned to question Nolan, who was still in high school at that time. Nolan was called out of class for questioning. He said his father had left his bank card at home and had driven to a country house in an old pickup truck, not the Ford he was driving. Faced with the evidence, he fell silent, realizing that the police had caught on to him. After a tense silence, Nolan was officially arrested for the crime committed at the Greenwood house. In November 2015, Nolan was charged with the premeditated murder of his father, Adam, his stepmother, Molly, and his younger brother, Gavin. The defense quickly appealed to a juvenile court to have the case dismissed in Nolan's favor. The legal proceedings in adult court lasted 2 years, and in 2017, they received a response to their request. The ruling confirmed that Nolan would be tried as an adult, even though he had not yet turned 18 at the time of the crimes. The hearings were highly emotional as Nolan claimed he wasn't the killer. He insisted that his father was responsible and that he was merely defending himself. This shocking statement surprised not only the police but also the families of both Adam and Molly. Nolan said he was resting at their family's Greenwood home on September 12th, while Gavin was sleeping in a bed nearby. They both suddenly woke to loud noises and screaming. At that moment, Nolan noticed a weapon aimed at Gavin, and then a shot was fired, killing his younger brother. In a state of panic, Nolan lunged for the weapon. Miraculously, he managed to push the attacker away, take control of the weapon, and attack the man twice. Only after the attack did he realize that the person he was confronting was his father. Understanding the gravity of the situation, he then poured gasoline from a car onto the house and set it ablaze to make it look like nothing had happened. He subsequently left Greenwood in the family's white Ford. However, this account was challenged by a forensic expert, who noted that a bullet impact found on a fragment of Gavin's skull indicated that a shot was fired at nearly a 90-degree angle. The prosecution concluded that Nolan, left alone at home while his parents were at a bar, waited for their return before killing both of them. Evidence suggests he killed Adam first, followed by Molly. Afterward, Nolan took his stepmother's bag and set the house on fire. On Sunday, he spent the day with his girlfriend to establish an alibi. However, the motive behind his actions remains unclear, as he has not confessed. Some speculated could be related to money. Perhaps he thought he could manage the family business better than his father. On July 13, 2018, after 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Nolan Buchanan guilty of murdering Adam, Molly, and their son Gavin. He was sentenced to 150 years in prison but will be eligible for parole after serving 25 years. The Nolan Buchanan case is a tragic and mysterious story that leaves many questions for the residents of Greenwood and the Adam and Molly families. The family had a seemingly peaceful vacation at a vacation home in the woods, but tragedy suddenly struck, taking the lives of Adam, Molly, and Gavin. Nolan, a 16-year-old boy, went from heir to murderer and was sentenced to 150 years in prison for premeditated murder. The true motive behind this brutal act remains a mystery known only to Nolan. However, he has chosen to keep it a secret, leaving behind loss and sorrow for those left behind. Thank you for following this story. Please share your thoughts and don't forget to check out the next episodes on our channel. See you again. In 1998, Shil Danishevsky-Kovlin, 34, lived in New York and worked in the financial consulting field. She is known for her kind and charming personality, which makes it easy for people to notice her. Extremely ambitious, she immediately entered the financial field in New York after graduating from college with a degree in marketing. Through dedication and hard work, she quickly became a respected financial advisor, serving many prestigious clients. Her colleagues admired her efficiency and determination. However, while her career was advancing rapidly, Shill's personal life was not as smooth. By her late 30s, she was still single, and she longed to focus on her personal life, hoping to find a partner who shared her values and ambitions. In February 1998, Shill attended a Jewish singles event at a bar called La Barbat in Manhattan's Hell's Kitchen. She saw the gathering as a perfect opportunity to meet someone who shared her faith. At the event, she met 25-year-old Rod Kovlin. For Shill, it was love at first sight. So convinced of their connection, she called her sister Eve just hours later, saying she planned to fly to Las Vegas to marry him that night. Eve managed to talk Shill out of making the impulsive decision, but the bond between her and Rod remained strong. Despite their 11-year age gap, they found themselves to be compatible. A few weeks later, they got engaged, and by September 1998, just 7 months after meeting, they were married in a joyful ceremony surrounded by family and friends. In 2000, 2 years after their wedding, Shill and Rod welcomed their first child, a daughter named Anna. The early years of their marriage appeared promising, with their bond growing stronger and them becoming inseparable. They were both deeply connected to their Jewish faith and participated actively in their local Orthodox Jewish community. For a time, everything seemed to be going well. However, over the years, differences began to emerge. They gradually realized that they did not have as much in common as they had initially believed when they got married in 1998. Shill was a hardworking and motivated individual who achieved great success in her career, eventually becoming the Senior Vice President of Private Wealth Management at UBS. Meanwhile, Rod has had many difficulties and has not achieved any success in his career. He initially tried a career as a stockbroker but failed to establish himself, leaving him reliant on Shill's income. Hoping to help Rod find success, Shill financed several of his business ventures. However, he lacked the drive to make them work, and each attempt ended in failure. While Shill found his lack of ambition frustrating, she continued to love and support him. Over time, more problems surfaced. Rod became obsessively interested in backgammon and gambling. After a few initial wins, he decided to pursue backgammon as a way to make money. He began traveling across the country for tournaments, sometimes staying away for days at a time, and spent countless hours practicing when he was home. Unfortunately, his obsession with backgammon wasn't his only troubling behavior. Rod also began seeking attention from other women, using websites and social media to contact them. At his most obsessive, he reportedly reached out to almost 40 women on Facebook in a single day, many of whom he had met at backgammon tournaments. His preoccupation with backgammon and other women took precedence over his responsibilities as a husband and father. To make matters worse, he started displaying sudden and extreme outbursts of anger, leading Shill to suspect that he might be bipolar. Shill experienced even greater heartbreak when she became pregnant with twins but tragically lost both babies during a premature delivery. One child died in the womb, while the other passed away shortly after birth. Despite this devastating news, she and Rod still desired another child. In 2006, they turned to an egg donor, and Shill gave birth to a baby boy named Miles. Over time, Rod's behavior became increasingly toxic and manipulative. He weaponized the egg donor process against Shill, cruelly reminding her of her inability to conceive naturally and blaming her for using an egg donor. He even goes so far as to tell their son, Miles, that Shill is not his biological mother. By 2008, 10 years into their marriage, Shill and Rod's relationship had completely unraveled. Rod's behavior continued to deteriorate. He suggested the possibility of an open marriage, a concept entirely incompatible with Shill's values as an Orthodox Jew. She firmly rejected the idea, but he refused to change. He even used the alias James Early to join JDate, a Jewish dating site, openly flaunting his infidelity without any regard for his wife's feelings. By January 2009, Sheil was emotionally drained and overwhelmed by Rod's toxic behavior and uncontrollable anger. Fearing for her safety and that of her children, Sheil confided in her sister, Eve, expressing concern that Rod's actions could cause harm. In April 2009, she decided it was necessary to separate from him to shield her children from the ongoing conflict. She rented an apartment across the hall in the same building and asked Rod to move there, so he could stay close to the children while minimizing exposure to further tension. Initially, the arrangement seemed to work, but after only a month, Rod broke the agreement and moved his belongings back into Sheil's apartment, further exacerbating the situation. By mid-May 2009, Sheil realized her marriage was beyond repair and decided to file for divorce. Rod moved back into the apartment across the hall. Gradually, Sheil's life began stabilizing. She fully dedicated herself to her flourishing career and, freed from her broken relationship, began dating again. Both personally and professionally, she began thriving once more. However, Rod cannot accept Sheil's success and begins to sabotage her life. He installed surveillance cameras in the building's hallways and secretly placed spyware on her computer to monitor her activities. He even tried to falsely accuse her of using banned substances to make her lose her job and said she had drained all the money in their joint bank account. In reality, Sheil had withdrawn only $800, while Rod had taken $7,200 since their separation. Rod's accusations failed, as Sheil's boss knew the truth. Frustrated by his failed attempts, Rod grew even angrier. On July 8, 2009, he abused his unrestricted access to Sheil's apartment and took their children without her permission. When he failed to return them by 8 p.m., as agreed, Sheil made repeated attempts to contact him, but he ignored all her calls and messages. Fearing for her children's safety, Sheil contacted the police. Contrary to what Rod had told Sheil, he had neither taken the children sightseeing nor to a theme park. Instead, he took them to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital and falsely accused Sheil of abusing them. However, doctors and agents from the Administration for Children's Services, ACS, quickly saw through his lies. The children were returned to Sheil around 5:30 a.m. the following morning. Despite being exposed, Rod continued his fabricated claims. He reported Sheil to the NYPD's Special Victims Unit, but detectives, like the doctors and ACS agents, determined he was lying and dismissed the case. This strategy ultimately backfired on Rod. The family court judge overseeing their divorce case restricted his visitation rights, allowing him to see the children only under court-supervised conditions. Additionally, the court ordered him to pay Sheil $425 per month in child support. When Rod claimed he couldn't afford the payments, the court prohibited him from spending money on gambling and backgammon, which further fueled his anger. Rod's anger escalated into physical violence, including choking Sheil and threatening to kill her. Fearing for her life and the safety of her children, Sheil obtained a court-issued protection order. At that time, he was still a beneficiary in her will. However, on December 29, 2009, she decided to completely remove him from her will and contacted her estate attorney to finalize the changes. On December 30, 2009, Sheil hired a babysitter for her children and went on a date with someone she had recently connected with on JDate. After returning home, she spent time with her children, put them to bed, and logged into her JDate profile at 10:13 p.m., logging out a few minutes later. The next morning, on December 31, 2009, Sheil's 9-year-old daughter, Anna, woke up at 7 a.m. and went to wake her mother. When she didn't find Sheil in her bed, she checked the bathroom. Upon opening the door, she screamed. Sheil was lying face down in a pool of blood. Anna immediately called her father, Rod, who arrived at the apartment shortly after. He moved Sheil's body from the bathtub, called 911, and performed CPR on her unresponsive body. When police arrived at the scene, first responders informed them that Sheil's body had been found in the rear bathroom of the apartment. Investigators soon arrived as well. Rod claimed that Sheil must have slipped while taking an early morning shower and hit her head on the bathtub. He pointed to a cabinet above the tub with partially broken hinges as evidence of an accidental fall. Initially, investigators believed it was a tragic accident. They briefly questioned both Anna and Rod before concluding their investigation and informing Shiel's family of her death. After returning to his office, Detective Rothermel reviewed the details of the crime scene. Although the initial evidence pointed to Shiel's death being an accident, he suspected something was amiss. Several observations from that morning did not align with Rod's explanation of a slip-and-fall incident. For instance, the position of Shiel's body and the angle of the detached cabinet door didn't match the narrative. Additionally, Shiel had visible bruises and scratches on her face, lips, and right arm, which seemed unusual for someone who had simply gone to the bathroom for a shower. To investigate further, Rothermel delved into Shiel's activities from the prior evening, uncovering a key detail that raised questions. The day before her death, Shiel had undergone a keratin hair treatment and was instructed not to wash her hair for 72 hours. This prompted Detective Rothermel to question why Shiel would take a bath when she wasn't supposed to wet her hair. Another inconsistency was Rod's claim that he had pulled Shiel's body out of blood-stained water, yet his shirt appeared to be completely clean when he recounted this to the police. Despite these observations, Rothermel chose to wait for Shiel's autopsy results before proceeding with a full forensic investigation of the crime scene. However, an autopsy was not performed because Shiel's family objected on religious grounds. Without further evidence, Rothermel's investigation stalled, and the case was eventually closed. News of Shiel's death shocked everyone close to her. However, like Detective Rothermel, many of her family members and friends have questioned the circumstances surrounding the incident. Shiel's sister, Eve, shared that Shiel doesn't like to soak in the bathtub and always prefers to take showers. Her friend, Stephanie Goldman, confirmed this and said that she never even took a quick shower. Even after Shiel's burial, her family strongly suspected that her ex-husband, Rod, was responsible for her death. These suspicions grew stronger when Shiel's estate attorney, Lance Meyer, disclosed a crucial detail. On the day of her death, she had been scheduled to meet with him to remove Rod from her will. This revelation pointed to a clear motive. Rod stood to inherit $5.2 million if Shiel died while his name remained in the will. Armed with this crucial information, Shiel's family urged authorities to reopen the case and resume the investigation. Detectives Rothermel and Francis Brennan, the lead investigators in the case, informed the family that the investigation could not proceed further as the case was officially closed. They explained that the only way to reopen it would be to allow an autopsy to be conducted on Shiel's body. However, due to the family's religious beliefs, this was initially not an option. After being denied assistance by the police, the family decided to hire private investigator Michael Swain to uncover the truth about Shiel's death and Rod's involvement. When Michael visited Shiel's apartment, he noticed some peculiar details. The cabinet hinges in the bathroom appeared to have been deliberately loosened, something Shiel, who had a slim build, would not have been able to do, even during a fall. Additionally, there was no bath towel in the bathroom, which was a strange detail considering Rod's claim that Shiel had gone there to take a bath. 2 months after Shiel's death, her family ultimately consented to an autopsy. On March 1, 2010, the authorities obtained a court order for the procedure, and Shiel's body was exhumed for examination. The autopsy revealed that her hyoid bone was fractured, a common indication of strangulation. As a result, in April 2010, Shiel's cause of death was officially reclassified from an accident to a homicide. However, investigators had to wait 2 more months to secure a search warrant for her apartment. Investigators began questioning individuals who had interacted with Shiel in her final hours. One of her friends, Melissa Shields, was the first to be interviewed. Melissa recalled meeting Shiel shortly before her death and sensing that something was troubling her. When Melissa asked about it, Shiel admitted that she felt her ex-husband, Rod, was following her. When it came time to question Rod, he refused to cooperate. The investigators later examined his emails and phone records from December 30, 2009. They discovered that he had been in contact with Deborah Oles, a married woman from North Carolina who had 3 children and was a Parcheesi player. They had begun an extramarital affair, and she had even traveled to New York to visit him. On the night of Shiel's death, Rod played online backgammon with Deborah until 1:03 a.m. At that point, he told her he needed to work on tasks for the Backgammon Federation. However, at 4 a.m., Rod texted Deborah, claiming he had fallen asleep and hadn't completed the work. Surveillance footage showed Rod leaving his apartment building at 4:13 a.m. and returning moments later. Notably, he gave the doorman a Snickers bar, an unusual gesture for a normally unsociable person like him. Shields' estimated time of death was between 1:25 a.m. and 4:25 a.m., coinciding with the window of time Rod was not in contact with Deborah. Investigators interviewed Deborah, but she spoke highly of Rod and provided no evidence linking him to Shields' murder. Rod was unable to access the money Shield had left him and her will due to the murder case filed against him in 2011 and the ongoing investigation. His children were eventually placed in the custody of his parents following a custody battle. Later, Rod's parents discovered he had stolen $84,000 from his children's college fund, which he had spent on trips with Deborah and backgammon tournaments. As Rod's behavior became increasingly violent, his parents evicted him and Deborah from their home. Angered by this, Rod devised a plan to kill his parents in order to regain custody of his children and access Shields' money. He came up with multiple scenarios, including using his daughter, Anna, to poison their tea, but he ultimately abandoned that idea. Instead, he planned to sneak into the house through a basement window, murder his parents, retrieve his children, and burn down the house. Some of these plans involved Deborah, but she refused to participate and urged him to abandon his schemes. While Rod was plotting ways to avenge himself on his parents, the police were actively investigating Shields' murder and searching for solid evidence against him. As the investigation progressed, Rod became aware that he was close to being arrested. In a desperate attempt to avoid suspicion, he tried to frame his own daughter, Anna, for Shields' murder. He created a fake email, supposedly written by Anna, confessing to having pushed Shields in the bathroom during an argument, which allegedly led to her death. In the email, he claimed that on the night of Shields' death, Anna had fought with her mother over her mother's romantic relationships. By 2014, Rod's girlfriend, Deborah, had also begun to fear him, leading to the end of their relationship. After the breakup, Deborah contacted the authorities and disclosed everything she knew about Rod's plans. She also provided hard drives with incriminating data from Rod's devices, which implicated him in Shields' murder. Rod Kovlin was arrested on November 1, 2015, just 2 months before the expiration of a 6-year waiting period that would have granted him access to Shields' $5.2 million fortune. Based on Deborah's testimony and other evidence she provided, Rod was officially charged with second-degree murder in 2016. His trial began in 2019 at the Manhattan Supreme Court in New York. During the 8-week trial, a 12-member jury heard witness statements, including one from Patricia Swenson, a former girlfriend of Rod's. Patricia testified that during a trip in August 2009, Rod had expressed deep anger toward Shields and repeatedly stated that he wanted to kill her. Prosecutors argued that Rod had been planning Shields' murder for some time and that, although the evidence was circumstantial, it clearly identified him as the only person with a strong motive. As the trial continued, more evidence against Rod emerged. Despite his defense lawyer's attempts to portray him as innocent, the jury found Rod Kovlin guilty of murdering his ex-wife, Shields Danishevsky Kovlin, on April 10, 2019. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years, for second-degree murder. Rod later appealed the verdict, but his appeal was denied. He is currently serving his sentence at the Attica Correctional Facility in New York. Zuzu Verk was born on April 22, 1995, in Keller, Texas. She grew up in a warm and loving family alongside her parents, Glenn Verk and Lori, and her older brother, Miles. Her brother described her as the brightest light in their lives. Zuzu attended Timber Creek High School and, after graduating, moved to Alpine, Texas, to study at the local university. She chose to major in conservation biology, driven by her passion for protecting the planet's wild spaces and creatures. Her academic achievements were impressive. She had recently made the Dean's List and was in the process of transferring to Texas University for her senior year. She was not only a dedicated student but also ambitious, idealistic, and focused on her goals. Her love for nature influenced her vision for the future. After college, she dreamed of living in Japan, where she could combine her passion for travel with her environmental advocacy. While in Alpine, she became involved with Robert Fabian, a young man 4 years her senior. At first, the relationship was based solely on attraction, but gradually became more complicated. Robert's charm attracted Zuzu, but her family, particularly her mother Lori and brother Miles, had some concerns about him. Lori viewed Robert as self-centered and dismissive, while Miles felt he was controlling and worried that he didn't support Zuzu's ambitions, particularly her desire to leave Alpine and pursue her dreams. Zuzu herself had similar worries. While she remained in the relationship, she confided in her mother that she couldn't envision a future with Robert. It felt more like a relationship of convenience than one based on genuine connection. Despite this, she remains kind and hopeful, reflecting her personality as she prepares to inform Robert about her transfer and her next choice. The last conversation Lori had with Zuzu was on October 10, 2016. Zuzu was excited to share that she was transferring to Texas University and ending her relationship with Robert. He had planned to take her to a movie the following night. Lori had no idea that this would be the last time she would ever hear her daughter's voice. As days went by without any word from Zuzu, worry turned into panic. Zuzu was known for always responding to messages, so her silence was unusual. Her parents, deeply concerned, started contacting everyone they knew who might have seen her. When Lori reached out to Robert, he said he hadn't seen Zuzu and mentioned that he was giving her some space. On October 14, 2016, Zuzu was officially reported missing. A massive search effort began, involving local authorities, state officials, and hundreds of volunteers. Helicopters flew over the desert, horseback riders searched difficult trails, and search teams extended their efforts hundreds of miles, even into Mexico. Flyers were distributed throughout the town, and a $100,000 reward was offered in hopes of finding Zuzu. However, hopes began to fade over time. The investigation began to focus on Robert Fabian. He told detectives that on the evening of October 11th, he and Zuzu had dinner at his apartment. He claimed that their dinner took a negative turn when he mentioned an ex-girlfriend, prompting Zuzu to leave in the early morning hours. He stated that he called her later but decided to stop trying to reach her when she didn't respond. This account raised suspicions with the police. A key witness was John Franco, a neighbor who resides downstairs from Robert. John reported seeing Zuzu enter Robert's apartment the night she disappeared. He could hear familiar sounds coming from Robert's apartment, such as chatter and laughter, but there was one strange moment. He heard Robert shout, "Shut up," breaking the usual atmosphere. Later, around 4 a.m., John saw Robert leaving the apartment alone, while Zuzu's car remained parked outside. John also recalled hearing what he thought were arguments and odd thuds from above, details that would later prove crucial. When investigators confronted Robert with this new information, his story changed. He now claimed that after the argument about the ex-girlfriend, he had left to drive to Dairy Queen to think things over. He said that when he returned, Zuzu was still there but left shortly after. This inconsistency raised enough suspicion for the detectives to request a search of Robert's apartment, to which he agreed. Inside, they found disturbing evidence. The bed was completely stripped of linens, and items like the mattress pad, clothes, and sheets had a strong smell of bleach. This painted a troubling picture. Investigators began to suspect that Zuzu's disappearance might be more complicated than they had initially thought. As the investigation expanded, a notable friend of Robert's, Chris Estrada, came to the group's attention. Their friendship dated back to high school, and this closeness made Chris a subject of scrutiny. Concerns grew after Chris appeared on national television on December 6, 2016, during an episode of Crime Watch Daily. Viewers and authorities noted his rigid posture, awkward mannerisms, and forced expressions. Phone records showed that Robert had called Chris at 3:15 a.m. on October 12, the same morning Zuzu went missing. During the investigation, Chris revealed that Robert had requested to borrow his credit card the day before, claiming to need it to buy plastic tarps for a painting project. This explanation raised suspicions. Why would anyone need painting supplies late at night? Investigators found the reasoning questionable and the timing suspicious. Another important witness, Brittany, told investigators that Chris had arrived at her apartment around midnight on October 13th, appearing shaken. He looked pale and anxious, as if he had witnessed something disturbing. When she asked what was wrong, Chris allegedly replied, "Don't interfere." Despite these troubling signs, the case hit a dead end. All the evidence was circumstantial. There was no body and no concrete proof linking Robert to any crime. Zuzu's family, feeling devastated and desperate for answers, held press conferences urging Robert to come forward and help, but he remained silent. Weeks turned into months. However, on February 3, 2017, 3 months after Zuzu went missing, everything changed. While patrolling a remote area of Brewster County near Alpine, the police noticed something unusual, a disturbed patch of soil. As they approached, they saw plastic sticking out of the dirt, along with a blue sock and a piece of dark fabric. They immediately alerted the authorities. When investigators arrived and began to dig, their worst fears were realized. Inside a shallow grave, wrapped in a plastic painter's drop cloth, lay the body of Zuzu. DNA tests later confirmed her identity. Zuzu, a vibrant young woman with dreams of studying at Texas University, wanting to live in Japan, and who loved the stars and the earth, had finally been found. The plastic wrap used to conceal her body matched the type Robert had purchased at Dollar General using Chris's borrowed credit card. This was the crucial evidence. Within 24 hours of the discovery, Robert was arrested and charged with evidence tampering and abuse of a corpse. 2 days later, Chris was also arrested in Phoenix, Arizona, facing similar charges. The charges against Robert were soon upgraded to murder. In April 2018, Chris agreed to plead guilty and testify against his best friend, Robert, and he did not deny his role in the crime. In contrast, Robert maintained his innocence, pleading not guilty. His defense attorney argued that there was no direct physical evidence, no fingerprints or DNA linking Robert to the murder. However, prosecutors pointed to Robert's suspicious behavior after Zuzu's disappearance. He bleached sheets, changed his story multiple times, and showed an unusual interest in the investigation. A coworker even testified that Robert, who was once calm, became erratic after Zuzu went missing, frequently inquiring about law enforcement activities. This behavior indicated not a concerned boyfriend, but someone anxious about their own involvement in a crime. The trial was painful for Zuzu's family but also brought some closure as the grim truth emerged. Zuzu's memory would endure, cherished by her family as a vibrant young woman with dreams and aspirations that were tragically cut short. On the third day of the trial, silence fell over the courtroom as Chris took the witness stand and made a confession that would alter the case's direction. He described a night marked by desperation, phone calls, and a secret that was never meant to be shared. Chris testified that Robert called him late at night, insisting it was a life-or-death situation. During their conversation, Robert recounted a distressing evening with Zuzu that turned violent. According to Chris, an argument led to Robert strangling Zuzu. As she gasped for air and eventually stopped breathing, Robert panicked. Chris claimed that Robert attempted to perform CPR, but it was too late. Following this incident, Chris testified that Robert entered survival mode, attempting to conceal his actions. Claims that Zuzu's death was an accident seem disingenuous. Strangulation is a deliberate and conscious act, not a knee-jerk reaction. Chris confessed that Robert repeatedly called him, pleading for help in disposing of Zuzu's body. At one point, Robert even showed up at Chris's home in Alpine, begging for help and urging him not to go to the police. Although Chris claimed he refused to assist Robert, he admitted that he did not report what he knew, a decision that would haunt the investigation. While he was not physically involved in Zuzu's death, his silence prolonged the suffering of her family and hindered the pursuit of justice. Whether motivated by fear, loyalty, or moral indecision, Chris chose silence over honesty, leaving Zuzu's family in the dark for an extended period. In an unexpected turn of events, a new witness took the stand in the courtroom. Roy Roman, who once shared a cell with Robert at Brewster County Jail, testified that Robert had privately admitted to killing Zuzu. He claimed Robert was motivated by Zuzu's discovery of secrets he wanted to keep hidden. Specifically, she had learned about a potential romantic involvement between him and Chris, and she threatened to expose it. Fearing this revelation, Roy stated that Robert decided to silence Zuzu permanently. Roy described Robert as distraught in his cell, repeatedly saying that he hadn't meant to do that. On May 8, 2019, after 5 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. Robert Fabian was found guilty on all counts and received a life sentence in prison, along with an additional 29 years for tampering with evidence. Chris Estrada, who had earlier accepted a plea deal and testified against Robert, was sentenced to 42 months in prison and fined for tampering with evidence and evading law enforcement. While Zuzu's family felt a sense of justice from the verdict, it did not bring them peace. Their beloved daughter was gone forever, and nothing could change that. In the midst of their grief, they received a painful reminder of what could have been, a letter from Texas University confirming Zuzu's acceptance into a program she had worked tirelessly to join. It was her dream, but tragically, she would never live to experience it. To honor Zuzu, the university renamed its amphitheater to Zuzu's Place and established a scholarship in natural resource management in her name, celebrating her dedication to protecting the natural world. However, the emotional scars from Zuzu's murder remain profound. Her brother, Miles, thought of her often and cherished small memories, like her washing dishes or her goodnight wishes, which now served as sweet but wistful reminders of the times they had together. Zuzu's family, although heartbroken, remains strong and is incredibly grateful for the ongoing support from the Alpine community. They acknowledged that without this support, they might not have survived the darkest times of their lives. Zuzu was a visionary, full of dreams of a life rich with purpose, travel, and making a difference. Her story serves as a heartbreaking warning: never remain in relationships that stifle your growth. Never let anyone prevent you from becoming your true self. Zuzu was close to achieving the freedom and life she dreamed of, but in the end she didn't succeed. Her story also reminds us to protect our dreams, stay independent, and never let anyone make us choose between love and freedom.
It was a quiet night in the small town of Matapalo, Guanacaste, but inside one house, a terrible event was unfolding. A man had just assaulted his partner, while a child nearby attempted to escape. Suddenly, everything went silent. What occurred in that house? And how did the little girl manage to survive? Jessica Duran grew up in Costa Rica. From a young age, she experienced neglect, not because she lacked family, but due to a lack of proper care. Locals often saw her wandering the streets barefoot, unkempt, and hungry, frequently asking for food. She dropped out of school early and soon became involved in addiction. By age 13, she was often seen in local bars, dressed provocatively, smoking marijuana, drinking beer, and seeking clients. When she turned 20, she became pregnant for the first time. Little is known about that child, except that reports indicate the baby was taken in by the paternal grandmother. A year later, Jessica met a man at a bar. He was also using banned substance, and they began a tumultuous relationship. After 3 years, Jessica became pregnant again. However, before the baby was born, he was arrested and imprisoned for attempted homicide. Once again, the paternal grandmother took care of the baby. Despite the man being in prison, their relationship continued. During one conjugal visit, Jessica became pregnant again and gave birth to a daughter. This time, she was able to keep the child. Jessica and her daughter were homeless until an old friend offered them shelter. To support herself, Jessica returned to escort. Jessica then met Dirk Beauchamp, an American who had visited Costa Rica multiple times. He became very attached to her, and they soon moved in together. However, concerns arose when neighbors noticed that Jessica's daughter was being left alone for long periods. Eventually, the couple was evicted and moved to a new home in Matapalo. Jessica's family grew when she had 3 more children. Dirk accepted all 4 children, including Jessica's stepdaughter, and gave them his last name, Beauchamp. The community viewed him as a dedicated father, often seen walking his children to school, taking them to music lessons, and spending afternoons with them in the local plaza. However, Jessica had not changed. She continued to struggle with substance use, leading to noticeable drinking and erratic behavior that concerned neighbors. Meanwhile, the grandmother of her second child filed for child support. Jessica ignored the legal notice and was ultimately imprisoned in 2015 at El Buen Pastor, a women's prison in Costa Rica. While she was in jail, Dirk had to care for all 4 children by himself. Those who knew the family said he faced difficulties and sometimes couldn't provide even basic meals. Social workers from the National Child Welfare Agency came to evaluate the family's situation, but Dirk claimed everything was fine, likely out of fear that the authorities would take the children away. While still in prison, Jessica met a man named Michael Adrian Salmeron Silva. After she was released, she returned home not only pregnant with Michael's child, but also with him by her side. This marked the beginning of a new and tumultuous chapter in Jessica's life. She was open about her relationship with Michael, expressing how deeply in love she was with him, despite their shared struggles with addiction. Michael set up a makeshift living space next to the Beauchamp family home and moved freely between both residences, treating them as one. Even Jessica's mother disapproved of the relationship, which prompted Jessica to cut off all contact with her. Dirk, an older and naturally quiet man who avoids conflict, put up with the situation to remain near his children. He also welcomed Jessica's new baby, her daughter with Michael, into their home. However, as time passed, neighbors started to see a shift in Dirk. His previously warm and lively demeanor diminished. He looked more tired and was visibly affected, both physically and emotionally, by the unstable environment he was living in. On the morning of February 16, 2016 at 8:40 a.m., a social worker from the Costa Rican Social Security Fund arrived at the Beauchamp residence for a routine welfare check. He had visited this home many times to check on the children's health and ensure the family had basic support. However, this time felt different. The house was completely sealed and disturbingly quiet, with vultures circling overhead. Worried, he approached a nearby man who was taking care of livestock and asked if the silence was typical. The man shook his head. The children usually played outside. They moved closer to the fence, and then they heard it, a child crying inside. There were no other sounds, no voices, and no movement. Realizing the urgency of the situation, he quickly called emergency services. When the officers arrived, they heard a child's crying coming from beyond the fence. They shouted, threw stones onto the roof, and tried to get a response from inside, but no one answered. Realizing they couldn't wait any longer, they forced open the outer gate and carefully approached the house. Looking through a window, they saw a young girl crouched on the floor, her clothes dirty. They checked another window, which was swarming with flies, and noticed that her clothing was stained with blood. They used a metal bar to pry open a door, with their weapons ready, unsure if the attacker was still inside. As they moved closer to the child, they saw she had injuries on her head. All she requested was water. They surveyed the area and were horrified to find the mutilated body of an adult male nearby. It was Dirk. The officers moved further into the house. In the first bedroom, they found 2 bodies under a blood-stained sheet, Jessica and her 6-year-old daughter, both lying in a pool of blood. Disturbed, the officers stepped back and headed to the back of the house, where they heard a baby's cries. In a separate room, they discovered a 6-month-old infant lying alone on a bed. Fortunately, she seemed unharmed, even though they feared the attacker might still be inside. They continued their investigation. In the bathroom, they found the body of the oldest daughter. She was partially undressed and had multiple injuries. There was still one last room to check. Inside, there was more blood, with streaks and splatters leading to an adjacent bathroom. There, they found a boy's body. The house was silent now. No one else was there. The officers radioed their station to report the tragic scene. The little girl, who had been asking for water, finally received a drink. She attempted to sit up, but her injuries made it very difficult for her to move. First responders advised her to stay still, as they understood her injuries were likely more serious than they looked. While authorities gathered evidence and removed bodies from the Beauchamp home, the 2 young survivors of the tragic event were quickly taken to the hospital. The 4-year-old girl was in critical condition, barely conscious, and had multiple stab wounds to her chest, abdomen, arms, and head. Her 6-month-old sister was stable but severely dehydrated, having gone nearly 48 hours without food or water. Both girls were then transferred to the National Children's Hospital in San Jose for additional treatment. A year later, the police officer who responded to the scene reflected on the experience. There had been signs of trouble before. Jessica had filed a domestic violence complaint against her partner, Michael. Given the chaotic situation at home, Michael, who is 24 years old, became the main suspect in a case involving 5 murders. The bodies were found on February 16th, but forensic evidence indicated that the murders happened 2 days earlier, on the night of February 14th, Valentine's Day. Investigators quickly started to trace Michael's steps. Security footage from a store about 700 meters from his home showed that he visited 3 times that night, purchasing beer, soft drinks, cigarettes, and a phone card. Knowing that Michael could potentially escape the country, Costa Rican authorities issued an international arrest warrant the following day. Michael had a prior history of aggravated theft in Costa Rica. With an extradition request now in place, the search for him intensified. Within 48 hours, Nicaraguan authorities confirmed his arrest. While officials initially credited police efforts for the capture, Michael's father later disclosed that he was the one who turned him in. He claimed that Michael admitted to killing Jessica and the children out of jealousy, while under the influence of banned substance and alcohol. Despite his father's assertions of remorse, Michael did not display any emotion in the days after his arrest. When he was presented to the media, he appeared emotionless, maintaining a cold demeanor and showing no signs of regret. Michael was detained at the prison in Nicaragua as he awaited his trial. On March 30th, a pre-trial hearing took place, attended by Costa Rican officials. The highlight of this hearing was the expected testimony from Jessica's daughter, the living witness to the massacre, who is only 4 years old. She connected through video from the Children's Hospital in Costa Rica, along with a judge and a psychologist. During her testimony, she clearly identified Michael as the person responsible for the attacks. She recounted how he first stabbed her mother, followed by Dirk, and then her siblings. She described the violent events in disturbing detail, even specifying the body parts where each family member had been injured. Throughout this, Michael remained completely still. Extradition was quickly dismissed as an option. Similar to Costa Rica, Nicaragua's constitution does not allow the extradition of its own citizens for trial in other countries. As a result, Michael's trial would happen in Nicaragua. Costa Rican officials began sending all relevant evidence, witness statements, and investigative documents to their Nicaraguan counterparts to facilitate the legal process. On April 19th, a preliminary hearing was held. The prosecutor presented the charges in distressing detail: 5 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, 1 count of aggravated abuse, and 1 count of endangering a person's safety. On the night of February 14th, the official report states that Michael entered the bedroom where Jessica was sleeping next to her 6-year-old daughter. He was armed with a kitchen knife and stabbed Jessica twice, once in the collarbone and once in the chest. As Jessica fell, the girl tried to help her mother but was attacked by Michael, who stabbed her 5 times in the back. Michael then turned his focus to Dirk, hearing the screams. Dirk grabbed a second kitchen knife to protect his family. However, he could not compete with Michael, who was younger, stronger, and fueled by something evil. Dirk initially sustained minor injuries, but then Michael struck with deadly accuracy. He stabbed Dirk in the left arm, made deep cuts to his neck and side of his head, and delivered 8 brutal blows to his back, another 8 to his chest. In total, Dirk suffered 19 stab wounds that led to his death. Michael's violent rampage turned into a horrific nightmare. He targeted 8-year-old Jessica's son, who tried to escape to his bedroom but was cornered. In a desperate attempt to protect himself, the boy was slashed on the hand. Though he made it to the bathroom, Michael continued to attack, stabbing him 3 times in the back, 7 times in the chest, hitting his lungs and heart. Next, he turned his attention to 12-year-old another girl who was hiding in a locked room. Michael broke in and stabbed her 3 times in the back before abusing her. The brutality escalated as he struck her 9 times in the head and 5 times in the chest. Afterward, he dragged her body to the bathroom, placed it in the shower, and attempted to wash away the blood. The violence persisted. 4-year-old the girl was hiding behind a door in another room. When Michael discovered her, he pulled her by the hair and slammed her against the wall. Then he used a knife, cutting her head, neck, body, and arms. The child lost consciousness, and Michael thought she was dead. He only spared one child, 6-month-old. The baby has been his biological daughter, which could explain why she was not harmed. As the prosecutors recounted the events in court, the atmosphere was filled with disbelief and sorrow. Everyone, except for Michael, listened intently to the horrific details, while Michael remained expressionless. In the meantime, the bodies of Jessica and her children were returned to her family, with Jessica's mother taking responsibility for their burial. Since U.S. authorities could not find any relatives for Dirk, he was buried next to Jessica and her children with her family's permission. The 4-year-old girl faced a challenging path to recovery. A stab wound to her skull had left her partially paralyzed on the left side of her body. She was hospitalized for 3 months, and doctors were hopeful about her physical recovery. However, the emotional scars ran much deeper. She had witnessed her family's brutal murder, endured her own vicious attack, and spent 2 days at the scene before being rescued. The hospital staff affectionately called her the Little Champion as she gradually began to regain her smile and mobility. Like her younger sister, she was placed in a caring, temporary home. Authorities began looking into adoption options, considering keeping the sisters together. Jessica's mother sought custody of the girls, but ultimately, in 2018, Costa Rica's Child Welfare Agency decided that separate adoptions would be in the girls' best interests. They concluded that none of Jessica's family members were equipped to address the girls' complex emotional needs. Given Jessica's own difficult upbringing, officials believed they were making the safest choice for their future. The girls' former home, where the massacre occurred, became a grim landmark. It stood silently, serving as a painful reminder of the tragedy. Locals shared stories of strange occurrences there, including sightings of the family's spirits near the site. Meanwhile, legal proceedings for Michael were moving forward. On June 10, 2016, a special hearing took place where he admitted to the killings. His defense team requested lighter sentences in exchange for his confession, but prosecutors sought the maximum penalties: 25 years for Jessica's femicide, 30 years for Dirk's murder, 15 years for the girl's abuse, plus 30 years for her murder, 30 years for the boy's murder, 30 years for the girl's murder, 20 years for the attempted murder of the girl, and 3 years for abandoning infant. In total, they requested a sentence of 183 years. On July 16, 2017, more than a year after the tragic massacre, justice was served when Nicaraguan judge sentenced Michael Adrian Salmeron Silva to 183 years in prison, meeting the prosecution's request. For the first time, Michael reacted by bowing his head and tapping his fingers on the table, likely contemplating the lengthy prison term ahead. However, under Nicaraguan law, the maximum prison sentence is 30 years, which means Michael could be released at the age of 55 unless laws change. The town of Matapalo will always remember the children who once filled their plaza with laughter, music, and kindness. Dirk, the American father, sacrificed everything to protect the children he loved and died alongside them. Following the tragedy, a debate emerged over who was responsible. Was it solely Michael, the decisions made by Jessica, the impact of banned substance and alcohol, or a broader cycle of neglect and violence that spiraled out of control?
In October 1975, the murder of 15-year-old Martha Elizabeth Moxley shocked the town of Greenwich, Connecticut. Her body was found brutally beaten with a golf club, which was traced back to the home of a well-known family with political ties. This tragic event caused years of anguish for the Moxley family as they sought justice for their daughter's death. Let's go back in time. The Moxley family moved to Greenwich, Connecticut, hoping to find a safe environment for their children, John and Martha. Their parents allowed them to explore the town freely, trusting in their safety. Martha was a remarkable teenager known for her beauty and intelligence. She had a vibrant personality and a close bond with her brother. Throughout her childhood, Martha showed impressive intellect. Her love for reading and writing reflected her passion for knowledge. Martha was well liked by her peers because of her outstanding qualities. Her lively and friendly nature helped her make many friends. She often found herself at the center of social gatherings. After the Moxley family moved to their new home in Greenwich, Martha continued to excel in school. Her commitment to her studies showed through her excellent grades and achievements. She had a natural gift for critical thinking and problem solving, distinguishing her from her classmates. Martha's aspirations went beyond academics. She wanted to impact the world through her writing. Her love for storytelling and her talent for expressing ideas clearly made her a strong candidate for a journalism career. October 30th was recognized as Mischief Night in Greenwich. During this tradition, children and teens engaged in playful mischief, often causing minor disturbances in their neighborhoods. The night typically involved activities like vandalism, property damage, and pranks. Eager to join in the fun, Martha Moxley spent the evening playing toilet papering over houses with her friends. It was a joyful night filled with laughter and innocent entertainment among the teenagers. Among the partygoers was 17-year-old Thomas Skakel, the nephew of Ethel Kennedy, who is the widow of former U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy. The Kennedy family was one of the most powerful and well-known political families in the United States from the 1960s to the early 1990s. Their name became closely associated with American politics, impacting all areas of society. President John F. Kennedy was viewed as a symbol of youthful energy and change, captivating the nation with his charisma. His administration made important advances in space exploration, civil rights, and foreign policy. After John's assassination, Robert F. Kennedy took on the role of leader for the family's political ambitions, known for his commitment to social justice and strong support for the civil rights movement. Robert's assassination added to the sorrow of the already mourning Kennedy family. However, their involvement in various scandals and controversies has damaged their reputation and overshadowed their political legacy. Sources indicate that Martha Moxley and Thomas Skakel were flirting and even kissing on the night she disappeared. The last sighting of Martha was around 9:30 p.m. when she was with Thomas near the pool in his backyard. After that, no one knew where she was until a shocking discovery was made the next morning, which stunned the entire community. On October 31st, the day after Mischief Night, Martha Moxley's body was discovered under a tree in her yard. Her clothing and underwear were pulled down to her ankles, but the medical examiner found no signs of abuse assault. Nearby, pieces of a 6-iron golf club were located, which became a key piece of evidence in understanding the circumstances surrounding Martha's death. The chief medical examiner of Connecticut performed an autopsy on Martha. His findings revealed disturbing details. Martha had multiple scalp lacerations, skull fractures, and injuries to her brain. The absence of signs of a struggle led the medical examiner to determine that Martha had been violently assaulted. The medical examiner determined that the weapon that caused her injuries and death was a 6-iron golf club, which matched evidence collected at the scene. The severity of her injuries and the strong evidence linking the golf club to the murder confirmed that her death was neither an accident nor an end to her own life. They classified Martha's death as a homicide. Witnesses reported seeing Martha with Thomas Skakel on the night she died, raising suspicions and directing detectives focused towards the Skakel family. An investigation later found that the golf club used to kill Martha originated from the Skakel home, which further increased doubts about the involvement of the two Skakel brothers. Although the investigation made initial progress, it soon stalled due to interference from the Skakel family. They interfered with the investigation right from the beginning. One significant way they obstructed progress was by blocking the police from accessing their son's school medical records. These records could have shed light on Thomas Skakel's behavior and any health issues he might have had at the time of the crime. By denying investigators this information, the Skakel family hindered the exploration of potential motives. Thomas's father took further actions to impede the investigation. He discouraged witnesses from stepping forward or sharing what they knew about the crime, making it challenging for investigators to gather first-hand testimonies. This interference also significantly hampered the progress of the investigation. When news of Martha's murder emerged, Thomas and Michael Skakel, grandsons of Robert F. Kennedy, became targets of intense media scrutiny. Reporters and the public were eager to uncover any potential involvement or connections to Martha's death. As members of the Kennedy family, the brothers faced overwhelming speculation. Throughout the investigation, Thomas and Michael maintained their innocence, asserting that they had no involvement in Martha's murder. They consistently denied being at the party where she was killed and claimed ignorance about the circumstances of her death. Their repeated denials attracted even more media attention and public interest in the case. However, despite the extensive coverage, there was no solid evidence linking the brothers to Martha's murder. The murder of Martha Moxley attracted worldwide attention because of the involvement of the Kennedy family. Initially, attention turned to Kenneth Littleton, who was hired as a tutor by the Skakel family just hours before Martha's murder. Littleton was a live-in tutor for the Skakel brothers, and since he was present near the crime scene, he was suspected of being an accomplice. His interactions with the brothers were examined, and some believed he might have influenced them to commit the crime. As time passed, the testimonies from Thomas and Michael Skakel about that night began to change. Witnesses reported that Michael had confessed to killing Martha with a golf club. Additionally, a former classmate of Michael claimed he received preferential treatment and boasted about escaping punishment for the murder because of his ties to the Kennedy family. Many books have been written about the Moxley murder in an effort to uncover the truth about her death. One notable book is A Season in Purgatory by acclaimed author Dominic Dunn, which focuses on the Moxley murder case. Dunn conducted thorough research to provide a detailed account of the events leading up to Martha's death. Another significant book, Murder in Greenwich by Mark Furman, a former police detective known, presents his perspective on the investigation and various theories surrounding the case. These books examine different theories proposed by investigators and advocates for justice for Martha. Despite significant media and public interest, the case remained unsolved, which caused frustration for both investigators and the public. The tragic death of Martha Moxley shocked the community and led to a lengthy investigation that lasted nearly 2 decades. In 1998, a jury was assembled to examine the circumstances of her murder. After a thorough inquiry lasting almost 2 years, there was enough evidence to charge Michael Skakel with the crime. In January 2000, police issued an arrest warrant for Michael, who then turned himself in. He was soon released on bail after posting a $500,000 bond. On March 14, 2000, Michael was arraigned in juvenile court. Although he was 15 years old when Martha was murdered, the judge decided to try him as an adult. Michael Skakel's trial began on May 7, 2002, in Norwalk, Connecticut. Prosecutors built a strong case by presenting evidence linking him to the crime and highlighting inconsistencies in his alibi. The defense maintained that Michael was innocent, arguing he was at a cousin's house when the murder occurred. The murder trial of Martha Moxley received extensive media coverage, drawing attention from both national outlets and the local community. Many people were invested in the case, hoping for justice for the victim. During the trial, the prosecution introduced a book proposal that suggested his involvement in the crime. In this proposal, Michael admitted to engaging in inappropriate behavior while in a tree on the night of the murder. Although he acknowledged being at the crime scene, he did not confess to directly harming Martha. Ultimately, on June 7, 2002, Michael Skakel was convicted of Moxley's murder and sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. He was assigned to Garner Correctional Facility in Newtown, Connecticut. Reactions to the verdict were mixed, with some individuals feeling satisfied and others raising concerns. Michael Skakel appealed his conviction, presenting several arguments. One of his main points was that the trial should have occurred in juvenile court instead of superior court, as he was only 15 years old at the time of the crime. He contended that his age should have prevented him from being charged as an adult. Furthermore, Skakel claimed that the prosecution committed misconduct by not disclosing crucial evidence that could have exonerated him, which he argued violated his due process rights and compromised the fairness of his trial. Nevertheless, In January 2006, the Connecticut Supreme Court dismissed his claims and upheld his conviction. In 2007, Michael Skakel hired a new attorney and requested a retrial in Connecticut court, proposing a new theory regarding Martha Moxley's murder. His defense team presented evidence implying that Gitano Tony Bryant, cousin of Los Angeles Lakers player Kobe Bryant and former classmate of Michael at Brunswick Private School in Greenwich. In an August 2003 videotaped interview with Vito Colucci, a private investigator hired by Michael, Bryant said that on the night of Moxley's murder, one of his friends had tried to molest her. Bryant said he had not come forward because his mother had warned him that, as a black man, he would be framed for the unsolved murder. A 2-week hearing in April 2007 allowed this oral evidence to be presented, along with other matters. In September 2007, Michael's attorneys filed a motion, based in part on Bryant's complaints, for a new trial. Official prosecutors responded that Bryant may have made up the story to sell a drama about the case. During this period, Michael's defense team appointed several full-time investigators to examine case details, hoping to uncover new evidence that would prove his innocence. Unfortunately, their efforts were hindered when a Supreme Court judge rejected Michael's request for a new trial, stating that Bryant's testimony lacked credibility and that there was no evidence of misconduct by the prosecutors during Michael's initial trial. Michael's attorneys once again appealed this ruling to the Connecticut Supreme Court. In 2009, a panel of 5 judges listened to the appeal, but a year later, on April 12, 2010, they ruled 4-1 against Michael. Despite these challenges, Michael and his legal team remained determined to secure his freedom. In January 2012, they requested a sentence reduction, arguing that he had been an exemplary prisoner and warranted leniency. However, this request was denied, and Michael's sentence continued to stand. In 2013, Michael Skakel appealed his conviction, claiming that his trial attorney, Michael Sherman, had not provided effective representation. During the hearing, Michael Skakel accused Sherman of lacking interest in his defense and being more focused on collecting fees to resolve his financial issues. This raised serious doubts about the fairness of his trial and the potential for a wrongful conviction. As a result, Michael was granted a new trial after it was determined that Sherman had not adequately defended him during his 2002 trial. On November 21, 2013, Michael Skakel was released on $1.2 million bail with other conditions. He must be monitored with a GPS device, have no contact with the Moxley family, must be checked in periodically by phone, and will not be allowed to leave the state of Connecticut unless permission is granted, although he later moved to Westchester County, New York. In December 2016, the Connecticut Supreme Court reinstated Michael's murder conviction in a 4-3 majority decision, writing that his conviction was the result of overwhelming evidence presented by prosecutors and that his legal representation was adequate. In January 2018, prosecutors asked the Connecticut Supreme Court to revoke Michael's bail and return him to prison to continue serving his sentence. However, on May 4, the Connecticut Supreme Court vacated Skakel's conviction and ordered a new trial. The court ruled that Sherman had provided ineffective assistance when he failed to contact an alibi witness named by Michael and that Michael had therefore been deprived of a fair trial. State prosecutors in Stamford have the right to seek a new trial for Michael. This ruling surprised many in the legal community and rekindled questions about the true circumstances of the crime. Despite the possibility of a new trial, in October 2020, the chief state attorney informed the Supreme Court that they would not retry Michael Skakel for Martha's murder. This decision came after a thorough review of the evidence. This decision marked the end of a lengthy legal battle that spanned decades and left many unanswered questions about the murder of Martha Moxley. In 2023, Michael Skakel filed lawsuits against the police investigator in Greenwich. The lawsuits alleged malicious prosecution and violations of constitutional rights. According to Michael's attorney, the fact that Michael spent over 11 years in prison for a crime he did not commit meant he could never be compensated for that lost time. Michael's lawsuits claimed that the lead investigator did not perform their duties properly, acted unethically, and intimidated witnesses during interviews, alleged that the investigator threatened witnesses to make them give false statements. These accusations raised significant concerns about the integrity of the investigation and the validity of Michael Skakel's conviction. Furthermore, The lawsuits argue that the investigators sought to profit from Michael's case, indicating that they were working on a book and film about Michael's supposed involvement in Martha's murder while continuing the investigation. Martha's brother, John, was shocked by the news of Michael's freedom and struggles to grasp the reasoning behind the court's decision. He is convinced that Michael Skakel is guilty and insists that just because Michael is free, it doesn't mean he is innocent. Instead, it reflects the judge's decisions and legal technicalities. In John's view, Michael Skakel killed his sister, a belief he holds firmly. Even though Michael is no longer in prison, John believes he will always be mentally imprisoned, tormented by his actions for the rest of his life. The Oxygen created a powerful documentary exploring the details of Martha Moxley's murder. The Moxley family chose to be part of the documentary to honor Martha and promote the truth about her case. Over the years, many theories have emerged regarding Martha Moxley's death. One of the key suspects is Michael Skakel. Several motives have been suggested for his alleged involvement, including jealousy and anger. Martha had a close friendship with Michael's brother, Thomas Skakel, which might have fueled Michael's resentment towards her. It has also been speculated that Michael may have seen a meeting between Martha and Thomas that triggered feelings of insecurity. Another suspect is Thomas Skakel himself. One theory proposes that he may have killed Martha out of jealousy or rage, especially since she reportedly rejected his advances. Additionally, their family tutor, Kenneth Littleton, has been considered a possible suspect. Others believe that her murderer was simply someone who happened to be passing by. Proponents of these theories argue that Michael Skakel was an easy target and that the true murderer has not yet been caught. On April 27, 2024, the quiet community of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, was shaken to its core by the devastating death of 30-year-old Micah Miller, a vibrant and ambitious woman who was found dead in Lumber River State Park, North Carolina. She had been married to a local pastor, John Paul Miller, for nearly 7 years. However, the picture-perfect facade of their relationship hid a much darker truth. What secrets lay hidden within Micah and John's marriage? How could a man of God allegedly commit such a profound betrayal of trust? Micah and John first crossed paths when she was just 14 or 15 years old, as she and her family began attending the Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. At that time, John was serving as the leader of the youth group in the same church. Despite the significant age gap, John was 28 years old when he first met Micah. The two developed a friendship. When Micah turned 18, it was John who officiated her marriage to one of his friends. Both Micah and her husband were involved in the church, with Micah having several responsibilities, including working with the media team while her husband was in charge of the sports ministry. After some time, Micah became John's secretary and babysitter for his growing family. John was already married and was the father of 5 children. One day, while Micah was babysitting for John's kids, his wife discovered her husband and the babysitter in a compromising position. It was clear that the two had developed feelings for each other. The fallout from this revelation was swift. Both Micah's and John's marriages ended in divorce in 2016. Just 2 years later, the 23-year-old Micah found herself thrust into a new role as the stepmother to John's 5 children, becoming the pastor's wife. In her position, Micah took on even greater responsibilities within the church, leading worship, overseeing the women's and youth ministries, even traveling abroad on mission trip. Her dedication to her faith and the congregation was evident, but the true nature of her relationship with John remained shrouded in darkness. As Micah's role within the Solid Rock Church grew, so did the allegations of abuse and manipulation that she endured at the hands of her husband. According to Micah's own sworn affidavit, she was subjected to a torrent of mistreatment, including emotional, spiritual, financial, and even physical abuse, throughout her marriage. Micah's family and friends would later come forward with harrowing details of the torment she faced, alleging that John had hacked into Micah's personal accounts, sending messages designed to discredit her. Despite the overwhelming control John exerted over Micah, she refused to be cowed. In January 2023, Micah made the courageous decision to separate from her husband, taking the first steps toward reclaiming her freedom. This decision, however, was not an easy one, as Micah knew all too well the risks she faced in defying John's will. Just months later, in October, Micah filed for divorce, determined to break free from the shackles of her abusive marriage. This bold move was undoubtedly a testament to Micah's strength and resilience, as she faced the daunting prospect of rebuilding her life in the wake of the trauma she had endured. Micah's choice to leave John came at a significant cost. She reached out to the police multiple times after feeling that someone was following her, which added to her anxiety during her attempt to end the marriage. Micah discovered her tires had been slashed and found a tracking device on her car, deepening her fears about John's obsessive need to control her. These events made Micah feel even more vulnerable as she faced the challenges of divorce, constantly anxious about the possible consequences of her decisions. In the months leading up to Micah's tragic death, a series of troubling incidents heightened the sense of danger and mistrust in her relationship with John. As Micah tried to free herself from the marriage and establish her independence, John resorted to increasingly desperate and threatening methods to keep her under his control. In February 2024, Micah's sense of freedom was drastically affected when John had her hospitalized against her will, claiming it was for her health. He alleged that she wasn't taking her medication properly, using this as a reason for her forced admission to a psychiatric facility. However, Micah's family and friends saw through John's deceit, believing he had exaggerated her mental health issues to gain more control over her. As the divorce proceedings progressed, Micah applied for spousal support, with a hearing set for June 5. This action was a bold statement, indicating that she would not allow John to manipulate her finances indefinitely. However, tensions mounted between them in mid-March when Micah asked John for $2,000 for a trip. John refused her request, suspecting that she would not use the money for its intended purpose. He had ongoing control over their financial decisions. At the same time as this financial dispute, John used his power of attorney to have Micah hospitalized. While she was in the hospital, John took her purse, car keys, and retrieved her car from a parking lot. He claimed he did this because he was worried about what Micah might do upon her release. On the morning of April 27th, surveillance video showed Micah leaving her apartment in Myrtle Beach at 11:38 a.m. She then drove to Dick's pawn shop, where security cameras recorded her entering at 12:12 p.m. and purchasing a Sig Sauer handgun on her own. Micah's phone search history indicated that she had looked up directions to Lumber River State Park, a secluded area in North Carolina. Just before 3 p.m. that day, she made a frantic call to 911. During the call, Micah asked the dispatcher to locate her phone, stating that she was in a national park and was afraid for her life. Her last words to the operator revealed her tragic intentions: she was about to take her own life. This call has sparked intense debate and speculation. Some online conspiracy theorists claim they heard a man's voice in the background, implying that Micah might have been pressured or coerced into making the call. Others argued that the entire call was potentially fabricated, possibly created using AI technology as part of a complex plan involving John. Just over an hour and a half after Micah made her 911 call, Johnny Jacobs, a North Carolina fisherman, discovered a woman's scattered belongings. Jacobs' discovery helped lead law enforcement to Micah's body, which was found in a swampy, wooded area just off the Lumber River. Jacobs reported that afternoon, he heard someone crying in the woods, followed by gunshots. While searching for the source of the sounds, he found Micah's belongings but not her body. He later told media outlets that he saw 3 people in a boat near the scene at the time of the shooting. Jacobs said he asked the 3 boaters, "Did you hear any gunshots?" and they all responded affirmatively. However, the boaters denied hearing any crying. Jacobs eventually traced the source of the sounds to an opening in the river. 20 yards into the opening, he found Micah's fanny pack about 2 feet from the water's edge, along with her cell phone and glasses. According to Jacobs, the fanny pack contained Micah's driver's license, bank cards, keys, wallet, credit cards, and a small Bible. Micah had died from a single gunshot wound to the head. Her Honda Accord was located in the park's parking lot, where authorities found a Sig Sauer gun case, a box of ammunition, and a receipt for a firearm she had bought earlier that day. The North Carolina medical examiner ruled that her death was a result of taking her own life by gunshot. However, Micah's family strongly disagreed with this finding, noting the many bruises, scratches, and defensive wounds on her body. They believe that Micah may have been forced or pressured into taking her life rather than doing so willingly. John insists he had no role in Micah's death, claiming he was not present at the time she died. He states he was at a sporting event in Charleston, South Carolina, which is about 3 hours from where Micah's body was discovered. Several eyewitnesses have confirmed that he was at the event. His vehicle also was seen traveling on Highway 17 in Horry County at 2:22 p.m. on April 27. The investigation into Micah's death faced challenges due to many inconsistencies and unanswered questions. For example, the presence of multiple shell casings at the scene raised suspicions that Micah could have been the victim of foul play instead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Additionally, Micah's family and friends believe her actions and behavior in the days before her death did not reflect someone contemplating end one's own life. She had a hair appointment scheduled for the following week and was planning to go to church with her family the Sunday. The investigation into Micah's death involved both the Robeson County Sheriff's Office and the FBI, who worked together to gather evidence and understand the circumstances of her death. However, public demand for justice grew stronger, as Micah's family and supporters did not believe the official claim that she committed end one's own life. A key focus of the investigation was the suspicion of John's possible involvement in her death. Allegations of abuse, manipulation, and financial misconduct in their marriage contributed to the belief that there was more to the story. As the investigation progressed, John's behavior and comments raised further doubts about his role in the tragedy. Reports described him as increasingly erratic, with actions and statements that seemed aimed at confusing, manipulating others. Just a day after Micah's body was found in the Lumber River, John made an alarming announcement to the Solid Rock Church congregation. Instead of addressing them with the seriousness the situation warranted, his tone was casual and disconcerting. He began by stating that there wouldn't be an altar call that day and asked everyone to stand for an announcement. John then instructed the congregation to leave the church quietly and not to talk about the announcement while still inside. In a strange turn of events, he urged them to keep attending church and fulfilling their responsibilities, mentioning that he would be taking a break for several days or weeks. He then shocked everyone by revealing that his wife had died, claiming it was self-inflicted and had happened in North Carolina. John's behavior during this announcement was troubling. He seemed to be fueled by adrenaline, requested the congregation to pray for him and his children. He also mentioned that Micah had been struggling mentally and needed medication. His comments were particularly alarming because Micah's body had only been discovered less than 24 hours earlier. The coroner had not yet determined the cause of death. Meanwhile, the Robeson County Police were still investigating the case as a suspicious death, yet John had already labeled it a suicide, attributing it to Micah's mental health issues, despite the significant evidence of abuse and manipulation that had existed in their marriage. John denied any wrongdoing, asserting that the allegations of abuse were untrue and that he never harmed Micah. However, Micah's family and friends saw through his claims and refused to believe him. After Micah's death, John's actions raised further alarm. He insisted on immediate cremation and would not allow her family to see her body unless they complied with his demands. Adding to the growing suspicion, John hired a lawyer and sent letters demanding an end to the accusations against him. These letters contained subtle threats, implying that he wanted to silence anyone who questioned his role in Micah's death. As more details about John's behavior came to light, the public's call for justice intensified. Micah's family, friends, the surrounding community demanded answers and urged authorities to take action against those responsible for her death. As the investigation into Micah's death progressed, the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office became involved, bringing their resources and expertise to the case. However, it was unclear which specific areas the federal authorities were investigating. Micah's family expressed significant concerns about the autopsy, particularly because there was no information regarding gunshot residue. They also questioned why the authorities had not conducted these tests. Additionally, the family was worried about the toxicology report, raising the issue of whether Micah was mentally sound at the time of her death or if she was under the influence of substances. There was no documentation to clarify this. The family's concerns grew when Micah's body was cremated shortly after her death, a decision made by John, which prevented the possibility of a second independent autopsy. This action only increased suspicions that John might be hiding something. As the investigation continued, various theories arose regarding John's possible role in Micah's death. Some suggested that he may have used his boat to transport Micah's body to the remote location where it was discovered. Security footage from the pawn shop where Micah bought the gun also faced scrutiny, with some believing that the timestamps were altered to support a specific narrative. Additionally, the fact that John had been reported to the police for transferring church funds into his personal account raised further suspicions about his motives and integrity. One of the most troubling findings from the investigation was the discovery of Micah's detailed diaries, which she had written to document the abuse she experienced from John. John had contacted Micah's family, trying to obtain these documents, which increased suspicions that they contained evidence against him. Micah's family stated that these diaries now belonged to Micah's sister, Sierra Francis, who was appointed as the special administrator of Micah's estate. The diaries are considered crucial evidence in the ongoing investigation, as they are expected to clarify the true nature of John and Micah's relationship and the circumstances leading to her tragic death. Micah's family and friends strongly believe that John's abusive behavior, manipulation contributed to her decision to take her own life. They highlighted the numerous police reports she filed, which detailed her fears for her safety and the harassment she suffered at John's hands. Additionally, allegations of multiple affairs and financial misconduct further reinforced the perception that John was a man driven by his own desires and willing to go to great lengths to maintain control over others. The tragic death of Micah Miller sent shockwaves through the community, led to various reactions and consequences. Following this, Solid Rock Church, where John was a pastor, became a focal point of the controversy. Church leaders reported receiving numerous harassing phone calls and messages from people seeking answers and demanding accountability. The situation was equally troubling for those directly involved in the investigation. The coroner who examined Micah's body received threats. Micah's family, particularly her sister Sierra, firmly rejected the official explanation of her death. They believed that Micah's death was planned and staged by John, and they were resolved to find the truth, no matter the challenges. Their unwavering dedication to seeking justice for Micah demonstrated their love and commitment, alongside their strong belief that the authorities had not thoroughly investigated the circumstances of her death. Meanwhile, Jacobs has become one of the most controversial figures in the Micah Miller case. On March 14, 2025, at the intersection of Iona Church Road and Raynham Road, a rural intersection 2 miles from his home, Jacobs, a key witness in the case, died in a collision between 2 vehicles. Death of key witness fuels belief in conspiracy theories. As more information about the case became available, the public's demand for action against John intensified. Micah's supporters, both in the community and on social media, called for authorities to hold John responsible for his alleged involvement in her death. Micah's family's relentless pursuit of justice and the continuous calls for accountability all highlight the deep, lasting effects of this tragedy on everyone involved. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Browning family. In 2008, Nicholas Browning turned 15. He was considered a kind-hearted teenager and a hard-working student. As the eldest child, he grew up in a family where his father, John Browning, was a respected attorney. John was also a Boy Scout leader and Sunday school teacher, earning admiration and recognition in the local community. Nicholas's mother, Tamara, was a kind and humble housewife, while his younger brothers, Benjamin and Greg, were well-loved members of the family. The Browning family lived in a house in Cockeysville, Maryland, a small town. Nicholas was an excellent student and a dedicated Boy Scout. While in high school, he was a tall and handsome young man, active on the golf and lacrosse teams, and admired as a role model. Many believed he had a bright future ahead of him. On the surface, the family seemed to be living a happy life, until tragedy struck. On the afternoon of February 2, 2008, Nicholas's parents drove him to a friend's house for a sleepover, where Nicholas and his friends planned to watch movies and play video games. The next morning, Nicholas and his friends needed to return home. Nicholas's parents had promised to pick him up in the morning, but they did not arrive on time. He tried calling them to find out what was going on, but no one answered. Frustrated, the teens decided to go to the mall with his friend's father. After shopping, they dropped Nicholas off at his home. During the trip, Nicholas repeatedly called and texted his parents, but there was still no response. When they arrived at his house, they noticed the family car parked in the driveway, but the house was strangely quiet. When Nicholas opened the door and walked in, he witnessed a horrifying scene. His entire family had been murdered. His father, John Browning, his mother, Tamara, and his two younger brothers, Greg and Benjamin, were all dead. A friend's father called 911 to report the incident, and the police arrived quickly at the scene. They found the teenagers in the yard, visibly shaken. Nicholas immediately claimed that a robbery had taken place. He explained that while he was staying overnight with friends, someone had broken into the house. He believed that the intruders' plans had been interrupted by his parents, and as a result, the robbers had killed the entire family. However, the crime scene shows another theory. There were no signs of a struggle, and police discovered 4 victims, each killed by a single gunshot to the head, in various parts of the house. A quick inspection of the property revealed no evidence of theft. Furniture was undamaged, and valuables in plain sight had not been disturbed. There were no signs of forced entry or any disturbance, leading the police to dismiss the idea of a botched robbery. Nicholas's account and behavior raised suspicions. Despite the teenagers' young age and the possibility of shock, all 4 boys were taken to the police station for questioning. To ensure that their statements could not be coordinated, they were separated into different rooms for individual questioning. During the interrogations, Nicholas's friends all gave the same account. They had spent the evening watching movies and playing video games until late, after which the group went to bed. They said they had not heard or seen anything unusual that night. The interview with Nicholas took place in a private room. The officer found Nicholas's behavior suspicious. When the officer entered the room, Nicholas was sitting quietly with his head down, appearing calm and even a little sleepy. An unusual reaction, considering that his entire family had just been murdered. The officer approached the conversation in a friendly manner, aiming to make it seem like a casual discussion with the witness. His goal was to gain Nicholas's trust so that he would answer truthfully. The officer hoped to secure a confession without a defense attorney present. Nicholas remained calm the interview. He explained that he had returned home from school at around 2:45 p.m. Shortly afterward, his parents decided to take him to a friend's house. Since the friend lived less than a kilometer away, they often walked to each other's houses. Nicholas told the same story as his friends, stating that they spent the evening playing video games and watching movies before going to bed. However, he admitted that he left his friend's house and went to his parents' house around midnight. His plan was to steal the family car and go out with his friends, making sure his parents didn't find out. When he got home, he noticed that the light was on in his parents' bedroom window. At that point, he climbed into the car. To avoid being seen, he lay down on the floor of the back seat. Nicholas was worried that the noise he made while opening the car door might alert his parents, but he didn't want to face his strict father's scolding. He decided to stay quiet and wait until the house was settled and everyone went back to bed. Nicholas claimed that he waited in the car and eventually fell asleep. It is possible that the shooting occurred during this time. Nicholas stated that he didn't hear anything and only woke up later before leaving. The forensic experts' report confirmed that the attack on the family occurred around midnight, killing everyone in the house. The family appeared to have been caught off guard. The first shot was fired at close range, killing the father, John, who was sleeping on the couch downstairs. Tamara and the 2 sons, who were sleeping upstairs, were also killed in their sleep. The police suspected that Nicholas might have been involved in the murder. His behavior raised suspicions, as he had withheld information from the police. It seemed odd that he chose to hide in the family car instead of immediately returning to his friend's house. Furthermore, Nicholas was the only survivor of the family and was home at the time of the murder. However, he claimed that he didn't hear anything, which further cast doubt on his testimony. Nicholas's claim that the lights were on in the house raised additional suspicions, as they were off when the police arrived at the scene. Considering his statement about the robbery, it was unclear why the robbers would leave the lights on during the robbery, and then turn them off afterward. Typically, criminals do not waste time on such actions. Nicholas had no explanation for these inconsistencies. The police then spoke to Nicholas's friend, who stated that Nicholas was at his house in the evening, but was no longer there when he woke up around midnight. According to his statement, Nicholas had already left by that time. This created an inconsistency in the timeline, suggesting that the teens might not be telling the truth. Due to inconsistencies in their statements, the police returned to Nicholas's friend for clarification. Initially, the friend confirmed that Nicholas was no longer at the house around midnight. However, when the police pointed out the conflicting timelines provided by others, he quickly changed his story. He then stated that Nicholas was still at the house at midnight. Nicholas's friend appeared nervous and hesitant to tell the truth, possibly in an effort to protect his friend. After being calmed down by the police, the friend admitted that after Nicholas left, he went straight to bed. He also revealed that he knew Nicholas had planned to steal his parents' car, but did not expect him to get stuck in the car or harm his family. The police then spoke to Nicholas again and shared new statements from his friends. This time, Nicholas claimed that he had left his friend's house and returned home to get his car later, at around 1 a.m. He changed his story again, stating that the lights were on when he arrived, but were off when he woke up. He assumed this meant that the robbers had entered the house while he was there. Nicholas still insisted that he had fallen asleep in his car. But how could he have slept after hearing 4 gunshots? This time, Nicholas said he had woken up at around 5 a.m. when his friend called him. Instead of returning to his parents' house, he went back to his friend's house without his car. Although Nicholas was increasingly under suspicion, he tried to remain calm. At times, he even laughed and joked during conversations, which the police interpreted as an attempt to mislead them. Nicholas appeared innocent, but the police believed there was something much more sinister behind his facade. When Nicholas eventually returned home with his friends, they entered the house through the garage. Nicholas invited his friends inside, which seemed unusual. Once inside, Nicholas pointed out that the garage door was open, which he found strange since his family always kept it closed. According to his friend's father, Nicholas repeatedly emphasized this to everyone present before they entered. As they walked through the living room, Nicholas led the way. He was the first to see his father lying on the couch, covered in blood. Shocked, Nicholas shouted to the others. His friend saw the body but immediately ran outside, refusing to go any further. During questioning, Nicholas confirmed all of these details. What worried the police most was the calm, emotionless way he spoke about everything, which was highly unusual for someone grieving the loss of a family member. When this story became public, people were shocked and tried to understand what had happened to Nicholas's family. Later, in his defense, Nicholas admitted that the car keys had been in his coat pocket the entire time. He remembered them when he visited his friend's house, and that was when he hatched the plan to steal the family car. The police were puzzled as to why he had not revealed this information earlier. They believed he was hiding something and lying again. Nicholas's friend stated that Nicholas had called home and asked his younger brother to leave the back door open, although the reason for this request was unclear. After this revelation, however, the police became certain that Nicholas had committed the murder of his family. He also told the police that his father owned 2 guns and had taken him hunting many times, so he was familiar with using them. Nicholas's friends revealed that he frequently had conflicts with his father, who had caught him drinking on multiple occasions. However, Nicholas claimed that a man who lived near his family was capable of such a brutal crime. He was referring to a neighbor who was a drug user and had a history of legal trouble. The police, however, believed this was an attempt to shift blame and divert suspicion from himself. There was no evidence against the neighbor, and he had a solid alibi. When the police publicly identified Nicholas as the prime suspect, he appeared very nervous and insisted that he was innocent. He later claimed that his parents were extremely cruel and that he had suffered years of mental and physical abuse at their hands. During questioning, Nicholas repeatedly asked the police if he could be treated in a psychiatric hospital instead of receiving a life sentence. The police did not give a clear answer to this question. However, Nicholas's suspicious interest played against him. Nicholas clearly realized his guilt and hopefully reduced the severity of the punishment. By the end of the interrogation, there was sufficient evidence against Nicholas, but his motives remained unclear. According to his friends, Nicholas had argued with his father shortly before the murder. He later recounted several instances in which his father had treated him harshly, even resorting to violence. Nicholas mentioned that their relationship had significantly worsened during the fall. It seems that the challenges of adolescence had a major negative impact on his behavior. His father, known for being strict, had tried to discipline and correct his son's behavior. According to Nicholas's testimony, on the day of the incident, he went to visit friends after his father had spanked him that morning for reasons Nicholas considered unreasonable. Police suspect that the punishment stemmed from the teenager's refusal to obey his parents. Friends' testimonies indicated that Nicholas, like many teenagers, had started to rebel. Tensions with his father were especially high after Nicholas was caught drinking on multiple occasions. Nicholas explained that he drank as a way to cope with his problems. Some relatives supported this claim, describing his father as a stern man. In interviews with Nicholas's classmates and close circle, police learned that the circumstances leading up to the massacre had been developing long before the actual event. However, it remains unclear why he killed his mother and younger brothers, who had not harmed him. Many classmates recalled him sharing stories about how he could no longer handle the abuse and emotional pressure from his father. While many described Nicholas as a hard-working and calm, kind student, his closest friends were aware of his darker side. Outside of school, he often beat his younger brothers, stole alcohol from his father's bar, and even took the family car without permission. Nicholas displayed troubling behavior, frequently bullying younger students and those with disabilities. Nicholas eventually broke down and confessed to killing his parents and younger brothers, though his explanation was both strange and disturbing. He claimed that during a sleepover with friends, he had returned home, sneaked in, and found his father asleep on the couch. Nicholas took a gun, contemplated his actions for about half an hour, and then decided to go through with it. He shot his father, and since everyone in the house was asleep, no one heard the gunshots. However, he did not stop there. After killing his father, he went upstairs and killed his mother before entering younger brother's room, where he also killed both of them. Nicholas admitted he killed younger brothers because they would have called the police. He explained that he had asked one of younger brothers to leave the door unlocked the day before, suggesting the murders may have been premeditated. Nicholas claimed he shot his family members in the head to ensure they would not suffer lasting pain. He then led police to the location of the murder weapon, which he had hidden in bushes on his family's property. Ballistic tests confirmed the weapon was used in the murders, and DNA evidence matching Nicholas's was found on the gun's barrel. He was eventually formally charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. Many people viewed Nicholas positively, so much so that after his arrest, the court received several letters pleading for leniency. One of these letters came from his grandfather, who claimed that Nicholas had endured years of physical and mental abuse from his father. Some people found it hard to believe that Nicholas could be guilty. While awaiting trial just 2 days before it began, Nicholas was in prison and made a phone call to a friend. Their conversation, which was recorded, included Nicholas joking about escaping. This behavior indicated that he felt no remorse and did not grasp the seriousness of his actions. However, during the trial, the mood changed dramatically. At one point, Nicholas burst into tears and apologized to his relatives, expressing deep remorse. The prosecution used this moment to portray him as manipulative, citing it as evidence of his two-faced nature. On the other hand, the defense argued that such a seemingly upright young man could not be a cold-blooded killer. These conflicting portrayals became a central focus of the trial. The prosecution highlighted Nicholas's darker side, supported by testimony from numerous witnesses, while the defense emphasized his positive qualities, including his involvement in the Boy Scouts and his excellent academic record. During the hearing, Nicholas became so emotional that he was unable to read his apology speech, leaving his attorney to read it for him. The defense's claim that Nicholas was insane was quickly dismissed. During interviews with the police, he had shown no signs of mental illness. Furthermore, he had no history of mental health problems or disorders. Despite this, his attorney pushed for Nicholas to be sent to a psychiatric facility that provided rehabilitation programs for juvenile offenders. The defense argued that Nicholas's motive for the crime was unconvincing. If it had been for money, he would not have been able to access it until adulthood. Killing his family would have only worsened his circumstances, potentially placing him in an orphanage or foster care. This suggested that Nicholas did not fully understand the consequences of his actions. A psychiatric evaluation was conducted, which concluded that Nicholas was mentally fit to stand trial. This ruled out the use of mental health as a defense. Since crimes like this are punishable by death under state law, Nicholas faced serious consequences. However, due to his age, he was not eligible for the death penalty. In January 2009, Nicholas finally reached a plea agreement with the prosecution. Nicholas Browning pleaded guilty to all charges, and a jury sentenced him to 4 life terms. He is currently incarcerated at a correctional facility in Cumberland, Maryland. In 2014, he requested that his sentence be reconsidered, but his request was denied. In Maryland, granting a pardon for a life sentence requires the governor's approval, which has not occurred in the state since 1994. This makes it unlikely that Nicholas will ever be released. Lorraine Cox was a 32-year-old woman living in Exeter, UK. She is dating a man named Ellie who lives in Scotland. Although the distance between them is quite long, they have gotten used to it. At first, they only met on weekends and talked, but gradually their feelings for each other grew deeper. By 2020, they had been in contact in this way for 2 years. Despite the challenges of the distance, they decided to get engaged. Now, they are building a future together and preparing for their wedding. Lorraine is also planning to have their first child. However, in early 2020, their plans had to change for several reasons. By February, Lorraine had moved to Scotland to be with Ellie, where she obtained a temporary visa, and they spent considerable time together. When summer arrived, she wanted to return to Exeter to visit her family and friends for a month or 2. This trip was not a breakup, she simply missed her loved ones. Afterward, she intended to return to Scotland and continue strengthening their relationship. Although restrictions in the UK remained strict, they were gradually relaxing, allowing public events to resume and many establishments to reopen. People eagerly took to the streets to socialize again, and Lorraine was no exception. On September 1, 2020, she arrived at her father's house in Exeter, excited to reconnect with friends. They spent the evening visiting several bars, enjoying drinks and good company, until they realized it was time to go home. Everyone left in a good mood. On September 2nd, Lorraine posted an unusual message on social media, claiming she was going to leave the country. This surprised everyone, as her only previous move had been to Scotland, and she had no plans to relocate again. She had just arrived to visit her father and intended to stay for at least a month. This sudden change in her mood and plans seemed out of character. In her post, Lorraine mentioned wanting to move about 50 kilometers from her father's house to a place called Plymouth, which she described as the first stop on her planned journey. This behavior was shocking because Lorraine was not known for making impulsive decisions, especially on such a significant scale. She had a stable life and a loving relationship in Scotland and had never mentioned wanting to move elsewhere. Now, she was considering a move toward France. Unsurprisingly, this post had a deep impact on Ellie. They had a strong relationship, making his fear of losing her understandable. Lorraine's friends bombarded her with questions. Initially, she responded willingly, but as the conversation progressed, her tone changed and mistrust grew. Those who knew her well noticed shifts in her writing style. She began using unfamiliar emojis, making odd mistakes, and her messages conveyed a sense of hostility. This worried her loved ones, as she had always maintained positive relationships with them, and there was no reason for her to display such aggression or undergo drastic life changes. Her father, Tony, who was hosting her during this time, even showed a family friend her old messages alongside the new ones. He pointed out clear inconsistencies in her writing style. Even those who didn't know her well noticed something was off. Throughout this time, Lorraine's boyfriend, who was named Ellie, was especially concerned and tried to understand her behavior. Initially, she responded to him with short, cold replies, but eventually, her answers became even more abrupt. The conversation ended when Lorraine sent him an emoji of a middle finger. This intensified the suspicion that someone else was using her account. Ellie had known Lorraine for 2 years, so the idea that the trip was related to a breakup or conflict seemed unlikely. They valued each other, which made her odd responses even more perplexing. Unfortunately, because of the distance, her boyfriend felt helpless and unable to intervene. A situation arose concerning Tony, Lorraine's father. Determined to discover the truth, he faced a challenge because he was away at the time and couldn't check his daughter's room for clues. Instead, he began speaking to Lorraine's friends, particularly those who had been with her the day before her sudden move to Plymouth. He was scheduled to return home the next day. Upon arriving home, Tony's first action was to go to Lorraine's room, where his suspicions grew stronger. He had already spoken with her close friends, and they all confirmed that no one had seen Lorraine since their breakup at the bar when everyone had left for the night. Inside Lorraine's room, it appeared as though she had never returned after her outing with friends. Her belongings from Scotland remained untouched, and nothing was missing from her room. It looked as if she had left for an extended trip without taking any of her things, which seemed impossible. The most alarming discovery was the bag she had left behind. Lorraine had diabetes and always carried a first aid kit to monitor her blood sugar levels. Her health depended on these supplies, and she never went anywhere, even for a quick trip to the store, without them. For outings like the one to the bar, she typically used a smaller bag. The fact that her larger kit was still in her room raised serious concerns about her recent plans. Tony realized that his daughter had not returned from the party, leading him to fear that something might have happened to her health. The messages she had exchanged with friends and relatives also seemed troubling. Worried, Tony sent another message to Lorraine on social media, expressing concern for her health and asking if she was okay. He warned her that if she did not respond, he would have to contact the police. The message was seen, but he received no reply. After that, Tony's and Lorraine's friends could no longer tolerate the uncertainty and began their search. They started by looking for clues in the bar where they had spent the evening on September 2nd. They interviewed witnesses, distributed flyers, and retraced the presumed route Lorraine would have taken home. It was clear that something alarming must have happened during her journey since she never came home again. Law enforcement and journalists quickly became involved. They were skeptical of the theory that Lorraine might have suffered a health crisis. Detectives believed that if that were the case, she would not have been able to send messages to her friends. Furthermore, several days had passed since her disappearance, and she would likely have been found in a hospital, but tests of recent admissions yielded no results. It appeared far more likely that Lorraine had encountered danger from someone. Journalists rushed to report on the situation, highlighting concerns over Lorraine's disappearance. They recalled that in May 2018, 2 years before Lorraine vanished, an attacker named Robert Proud had attacked a woman who strikingly resembled her. He had abused her but did not kill her, and then evaded capture for a long time. Given his criminal history, it raised fears that there could be more victims. Although he had completed his prison sentence, investigators began considering Lorraine as a potential victim. At the time of her disappearance, Robert was living near the path Lorraine would have taken home. This connection led to his arrest, and police sought to extract a confession from him. They believed he had kidnapped, abused, and possibly killed her, and that he might have disposed of her body. It was suspected that he took her phone and pretended to communicate with her friends and family to buy himself time and create confusion. There was another theory regarding Lorraine's disappearance. Some believed that Robert might have attacked her, but instead of dying, she was hiding to avoid becoming his victim again. The detectives prioritized finding Lorraine because she was clearly in danger. Robert might have been holding her hostage. The situation could have escalated, posing a significant threat. To test this theory, they began reviewing surveillance footage from cameras along Lorraine's potential route that night. Even after narrowing down the time frame, they had about 11,000 hours of footage from over 400 cameras across 120 different locations. Analyzing this footage was time-consuming, but it proved worthwhile, yielding the first clues needed to catch the criminal. Eventually, they spotted a girl who matched Lorraine's description in the recordings. After leaving her friends at the bar, she headed toward her father's house without making any turns. She almost made it home, but a few blocks away, something caught her attention: a kebab shop on the ground floor of an apartment building, which was open at night. Lorraine went inside, likely to grab a snack, and then left to eat on a bench before continuing her way home. Around 2:45 a.m., she returned to the kebab shop, but this time accompanied by an unfamiliar man. This raised alarms because he didn't appear to be just a random passerby. The footage suggested they had interacted, and he had managed to get her attention. The police continued to investigate the recordings and noted that the young man had been following Lorraine after they left the shop. This behavior was concerning, especially since she seemed to be walking voluntarily and the street was deserted. Detectives suspected the man might be a predator who targeted his victim, potentially involved in Lorraine's disappearance and the messages she had sent to her loved ones after the incident. He maintained a distance while following her, trying to remain inconspicuous, and seemed to be assessing the situation. It looked as though he was stalking her, especially since she appeared intoxicated and was stumbling. She had a valuable phone, and with no one accompanying her that night, he saw an opportunity to attack. The police attempted to locate another recording to determine how Lorraine left the building from at least one camera, but were unsuccessful. It appeared she had not exited at all. They spent considerable time reviewing the video footage, only to confirm that Lorraine had not left since she was last seen. The detectives concluded that she might still be inside, possibly being held against her will. Unfortunately, by the time they gathered this information, 8 days had passed. Given this long duration, only a miracle could save Lorraine, who suffered from diabetes. Nevertheless, her family held on to hope. The police obtained a clear photo of the man who accompanied and followed Lorraine that night. They printed it out and began distributing it through the media to attract witnesses. Initially, they visited the kebab shop and spoke with the owner. He informed them that he lived above the shop but had rented the apartment below to a young man about a month ago. This young man had moved in unofficially and was very withdrawn, to the extent that the owner didn't know much about him. The owner even expressed doubts about the young man's name. When police officers visited the apartment, they anticipated finding a crime scene. However, everything was surprisingly neat and clean. The young man living there identified himself as Christopher Mayer and showed them his identification. There was no sign of Lorraine in the apartment, and he allowed the detectives inside without any resistance. They inspected the place thoroughly to ensure that no one was being held against their will. Christopher was then shown a photo of Lorraine, along with a CCTV image in which a man resembling him was seen accompanying her to the house. He strongly denied any connection, claiming that he did not know her. However, the clear photograph made the police skeptical, as the similarities were unmistakable. A brief verbal confrontation ensued, with Christopher maintaining his stance. During this exchange, he insisted that he would never bring a strange woman to his apartment. The police then became interested in Christopher's mobile phone, which they seized for examination. They discovered that it contained Lorraine's SIM card, although the card was currently missing. This evidence confirmed that he had at least seen her recently. Further investigation revealed that a suspicious post had been made on Lorraine's social media account using this mobile phone. It appeared that Christopher had sent strange messages to her loved ones. After the unsettling incident, whatever it was, he had taken Lorraine's phone. Rather than using it for communication, he inserted a SIM card into his own phone to access her contact list and social media account. This raised further suspicions about Christopher. He was the last person confirmed to have seen Lorraine alive, and his attempts to manipulate her account seemed suspicious. It became clear that he was trying to cover his tracks, raising questions about his motives that the authorities still needed to uncover. Christopher was arrested and charged with the kidnapping of Lorraine Cox. That same day, forensic experts arrived at his apartment to investigate. They used a substance called luminol to carefully examine the area. While they found several suspicious traces of evidence, the most alarming findings were in a nearby alley. During their search of the apartment, they discovered blood and numerous signs that supported the theory that Lorraine was dead, particularly around a garbage can. The forensic team speculated that Christopher might have disposed of evidence by throwing away the body. They searched the alley and found a large plastic bag inside one of the trash containers that contained human remains. However, it was not a complete body. Some parts, including the torso and head, were missing, making identification difficult. Consequently, the case shifted from a missing persons investigation to a murder investigation, and the work continued. Detectives learned that on the night of Lorraine's disappearance, in addition to Christopher, 5 other young men were present. However, none appeared on the CCTV footage with Lorraine. These men likely entered the apartment to buy food or for other reasons, but their involvement needed further investigation. They could have unwittingly been present during the crime or could have assisted in covering up evidence. Notably, the group behaved very differently. Except for Christopher, everyone was cooperative and willing to provide information. Upon further investigation, the 5 other young men were found to be locals who lived nearby. Since there was no evidence against them, they were released. In stark contrast, Christopher was uncooperative, reluctant to talk, and often gave vague or confusing answers. He seemed to believe that the police lacked sufficient evidence against him, but they soon discovered that his real name was Azam Mangori. This revelation marked a turning point in the investigation, as detectives confronted him with the truth, signaling the beginning of the unraveling of his story. Azam claims that he changed his name because he was born in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, where people who do not follow tradition can face severe punishment, including being stoned to death. As an adult, he left his conservative homeland but still lives in fear of being hunted down and killed. To avoid this dangerous situation, he began calling himself Christopher. He had been living illegally in the UK since December 2018 to avoid returning to Iraq. Azam also possessed a high-quality fake ID under the name Christopher Mayer to evade detection by immigration authorities. This explains why the landlord knew almost nothing about the man. He was very cautious, had not attended school or worked anywhere, and lived off odd jobs. However, the interrogation ended abruptly. After admitting to these things, he refused to talk about Lorraine. His previous admissions were not significant to the police. DNA testing confirmed that the remains found in a trash bin were those of Lorraine. In Azam's apartment, DNA traces and other evidence indicated that Lorraine had been killed there because Azam had failed to clean thoroughly. The police also discovered a large handsaw and replacement blades purchased after the crime. Other items found included a driver's license, a debit card, and a wallet, all mutilated. Nearby trash bins contained bloody clothing, Lorraine's phone, and a SIM card discarded in the sewer. Unfortunately, parts of her body were never recovered. Detectives analyzed the location data from Azam's mobile phone on the day of Lorraine's murder and the subsequent days when he disposed of evidence. This investigation led them to a location on the city's outskirts known as Tin Pit Hill. During the search, they found Lorraine's torso and head, which were not well concealed. Investigators noted unsettling details. A piece of clothing was stuffed into her mouth, and a patch of skin was missing from her back, possibly taken as a trophy by the perpetrator. Unfortunately, no other body parts were located, and the remains were in an advanced state of decomposition, complicating the determination of the cause of death. The forensic expert concluded that Lorraine had likely been strangled. Despite strong evidence of his guilt, Azam continued to deny his involvement and created false stories. He even attempted to involve banned organizations in the case. The trial commenced in spring 2021. Although he never confessed, Azam and his defense team significantly altered his narrative. He now claimed to have a normal orientation and stated that he encountered Lorraine when she came to his place late at night after a bar visit. He approached her on the street and convinced her to come to his apartment for some intimacy. Azam maintained that Lorraine voluntarily came to his apartment after drinking heavily and using illegal substances. He claimed that after trying those substances himself, he experienced severe distortion of perception and lost consciousness. When he regained awareness, he found Lorraine in the bathroom, unresponsive. He alleged that he saw a puddle of urine beneath her and believed she had overdosed. Azam attempted to perform CPR, but it was unsuccessful. In a panic and without knowing the emergency number, he sat on the bathroom floor next to her body. Hallucinations then began, and he claimed to see dark creatures emerging from her mouth, prompting him to shove a piece of his t-shirt into her mouth to stop it. He pushed the cloth in so far that it could have caused her to choke. Despite being in a state of panic, he managed to find and send a video he had recorded around the same time to a friend, where he appeared calm and even exhaled smoke into the camera. He explained that he filmed the video to help himself calm down. His behavior grew increasingly bizarre. Instead of calling for help, he decided to dispose of the body and planned to flee from his relatives. Naturally, this account sounded implausible, leaving him with no solid defense. According to Azam, he was unsure what he would do after Lorraine died and kept her body in his apartment until he decided to dispose of it. When his anxiety reached its peak, he chose to throw it away. He called a taxi to take the bag with the remains to a wooded area on the outskirts of Exeter. Prosecutors noted that he seemed to be obsessed with amputation, as evidenced by the precise cuts he made, which horrified forensic experts. It was clear he had researched this topic extensively and was well prepared. That evening, Azam tried to connect with people on an escort website, seeking companionship but was unsuccessful. Later, he saw Lorraine on the street eating alone and viewed her as an ideal target. It seems that Azam may have premeditated this murder to fulfill his dark fantasies. Even with substantial evidence against him, his trial lasted 5 weeks. Ultimately, the jury found him guilty of murder and attempting to obstruct justice. He received a life sentence but is eligible for parole after 20 years, which means he could be released at the age of 44. Lorraine's boyfriend, Ellie, experienced profound grief, stating that a part of him died with her. He lives daily with this pain and struggles against despair. Lorraine's father, Tony, organized a charity march to rally support for his daughter. Participants silently walked the route she would have taken from the bar to her home, a journey she never completed. In the aftermath, Tony became an activist advocating for more CCTV cameras on UK streets to help prevent and solve violent crimes. He also started to make regular donations to an anti-abuse organization based in the UK. Even after justice was served, Lorraine Cox's family remained uncertain about how Azam was able to lure her into his apartment. Security footage showed her following him willingly. Azam claimed that he engaged her in conversation and offered her alcohol and a banned substance, which she accepted. However, toxicology reports found no traces of banned substances in her system, and a forensic expert stated that she did not die from diabetes, suggesting that Azam's account might be false. Sadly, the truth about what happened in his apartment may never be revealed, as only Azam and Lorraine know what truly occurred. Some believe Azam exploited Lorraine's kindness by asking for help, and that she may have felt unable to refuse, ultimately leading her into a dangerous situation.
Mariana Jocelyn Baltira Valenzuela was born on November 24, 1998, in the city of Ixtapan de la Sal, located in the state of Mexico. She is the older sibling of 2 children from a modest family. Fate decreed that she had to fight for her life from her first days. She was born much earlier than expected, and doctors seriously feared that the child, with a critically low weight, would not survive, which they informed her parents, Syra and Orlando. Mariana spent the first 2 months of her life in a hospital, in a special ward for premature babies. Her mother prayed day and night for her daughter's health, and her prayers were answered. The girl quickly recovered and gained weight. By the new year of 1999, she was discharged home, allowing her parents to celebrate the holiday with their daughter. Fortunately, Mariana had no external consequences of prematurity. She grew up slim and beautiful, but her health was very poor from a very early age. When Mariana was 4 years old, a second child appeared in the family, a boy. Mariana adored her younger brother and helped her parents take care of him. From the earliest age, they were very close and practically inseparable. At the age of 6, Mariana was diagnosed with epilepsy, which required her to regularly take special medications to minimize the likelihood of seizures. The prescribed drugs and constant monitoring by specialists yielded good results, allowing her to lead a relatively ordinary life, not too different from her peers. Moreover, she treated her health responsibly, following the regimen and taking the necessary medications. Mariana studied well at school, drew beautifully, and loved music. She was a very kind, open, and sincere girl. Everyone who knew her personally spoke positively about her. However, she was also modest and shy, especially in her teenage years. She had only a couple of best friends, did not go on dates, did not attend parties, and hardly interacted with boys. Mariana preferred to spend time at home with her family, with whom she had very close and warm relationships. The fragile and petite girl looked much younger than her age. At 16, she seemed no older than 13. Kind-hearted and sympathetic, Mariana always tried to help homeless animals, which she fed, treated, looked after, and then handed over to safe hands. As a high school student, she finally decided to become a veterinarian and provide professional assistance to those in need. Her parents often said that their daughter was too naive and trusting. She didn't perceive evil or danger from other people, as she herself brought only light and kindness into the world. Therefore, her father and mother were always worried that Mariana could be offended or harmed by someone taking advantage of her innocence. The area where the Baltira family lived was relatively calm. Almost everyone who lived there knew each other by sight. However, along their street, there were a large number of shops where many migrant workers worked unofficially. Some of them lived right in the shops, as most did not have their own housing, and some could not even afford to rent a room. Naturally, among these workers were individuals with extensive criminal histories. But, as long as they performed their duties properly, the shop owners usually had no complaints about them. About 50 meters from the Baltira family home was a butcher shop. The shop owner hired 4 workers, 2 locals who sold goods, 2 immigrants unloading cargo, butchered carcasses, and cleaned the store. The shop owner allowed the workers to stay on the second floor of the shop, which was an attic. As Mariana grew older, her parents began to periodically ask her to go shopping for the family, including to the aforementioned butcher shop. There she repeatedly encountered one Cruz Quintero Martinez, a worker of the landlord who lived on the second floor. She felt fear of this man just by his presence. She repeatedly told her friends and her parents that there was something sinister in his gaze that made her blood run cold. At the same time, there was nothing specific she could blame on this man since he did not approach her or attempt to contact her in any way, but merely looked at her. So her parents decided not to let their daughter go to this store anymore and went shopping for the necessities themselves. At some point, Juan Martinez committed a minor theft, resulting in the store owner's decision to fire him. After that incident, they did not hear from him for about a year. However, in early summer 2017, he returned to his former workplace, tearfully begged his former employer to rehire him, assuring him that he would work diligently. Remarkably, he was rehired and moved back into the second floor of the store. Cyrus' niece was visiting the Baltiras while Mariana and her younger brother were on summer vacation, with Orlando being the only one at work. Around 9 a.m., Syra asked her daughter to go to the local supermarket to buy breakfast. She believed her daughter was old enough to handle such a task. Moreover, the street was well lit and crowded. In her opinion, nothing bad could happen. She gave her daughter some money and asked Mariana to buy milk, eggs, and vegetables. Mariana left the house dressed in an old t-shirt and pajama pants. The store was located less than a couple of hundred meters from their house, so the round trip to get there, buy the necessary items, and return should not have taken more than half an hour. However, when an hour passed and Mariana still had not returned, her mother grew concerned, especially since Mariana's phone was left at home. With her little niece in her arms, Syra went to look for her daughter. She walked down the street to the store and asked the cashiers if they had seen a young girl in glasses. They informed her that a girl fitting her description had bought groceries a quarter of an hour ago and had left the store. Panic began to set in. Syra realized that something terrible had happened. Syra returned home, asked her son to look after his niece, and then went out to the street, where she began asking neighbors, street vendors, and passers-by if they had seen her daughter. However, it seemed as if the girl had vanished without a trace. Syra immediately reported the incident to the police and called her husband, who rushed home from work to help find their daughter. By the time the police arrived at the scene, dozens of neighbors, as well as relatives and friends of the Baltira family, had already joined the search. They called all of Mariana's acquaintances, combed the streets, and posted printed leaflets with her photographs. Initially, law enforcement officials were not particularly concerned about the situation. They asked the parents whether their daughter could have gone on a date or visited someone. Syra and Orlando insisting that their daughter would never go anywhere without informing them, especially since she had gone to the store in her home clothes and with a grocery bag, knowing she was expected back home. There were surveillance cameras installed in the area where Mariana disappeared, but almost none of them were functional. The entire day of searching yielded no results, and not a single trace of the girl was found. As night fell, anxiety and panic turned into despair. The parents realized that they would likely never see Mariana alive again. The next day, July 28, at about 8 a.m., Mariana's parents received a call from a nearby relative, who informed them that several police cars had arrived at a butcher's shop. Without hesitation, the Baltira got ready and went to the indicated location. Law enforcement agencies did not allow them inside. But Syra and Orlando had no intention of leaving. Minutes after checking the scene, one of the police officers informed Orlando that the body of a young girl, identified as the missing Mariana, had been found on the second floor of the building, lifeless and badly mutilated. Orlando was invited inside to confirm her identity, but Syra was strongly advised against entering, as the crime scene was truly shocking. Orlando could not believe his eyes as he looked at the body lying in a puddle of blood, his daughter. His world collapsed in an instant, and he did not know how to tell his wife, who was waiting outside. Mariana had been repeatedly abused and brutally mutilated. The cause of death was massive blood loss due to a stab wound to the stomach. The perpetrator cut open her abdomen while she was still alive, leaving her to bleed to death. An expert opinion showed that her death occurred on the night of July 27th, just a few hours before the discovery of her body. Therefore, she was alive for almost 24 hours from the time of her disappearance, during which the criminal abused her until he fatally wounded her. The murder weapon, a knife intended for cutting up carcasses, was found on the floor next to her body. The body was discovered by the owner of the store when he arrived for work that morning. According to him, every last Thursday of the month was designated as cleaning day, during which he did not work. On that day, the owner was engaged in organizational matters, meetings with suppliers, and submitting reports to the tax office while his employees cleaned and disinfected the premises. When he arrived in the morning, he immediately noticed blood stains on the floor. Initially thinking that one of his employees living on the second floor had been injured, he was shocked to find bloody men's clothing, a knife, and the body of a young girl in a pool of blood. In addition, a large sum of money had gone missing from the cash register, which the criminal had evidently taken upon fleeing. Two men who lived and worked at the store immediately came under suspicion. However, one of them showed up for work an hour later, appearing just as shocked as everyone else. He explained that he had to return home to another city urgently, and his colleague, Juan, said Juan would cover for him and clean the store himself. The police concluded that this man was telling the truth, noting that there were no traces of him at the crime scene, and he was excluded from the list of suspects. By that time, CCTV footage from the supermarket, which Mariana had visited on the last day of her life, was obtained. The footage showed she entering the store, followed by one a few minutes later, the man who worked at the butcher's shop and had instilled genuine fear in Mariana. He stalked his victim like a wild animal hunting prey, following her out of the supermarket without purchasing anything. After that, both of their trails vanished, Reconstructing the sequence of events outside the store proved impossible. Although there were cameras on the street, they were non-functional, and none of the numerous passers-by or street sellers reported anything suspicious. Mariana's parents were convinced that their daughter would never have gone with this man, no matter how he might have lured her. They believed he had forcibly taken her to the store. However, they were left wondering why she did not scream or call for help, and why none of the many passers-by or street vendors noticed anything unusual about the situation. 27-year-old Juan Cruz Quintero Martinez was characterized as withdrawn and uncommunicative. Those who knew him said that he was a violent person with sadistic tendencies, which he displayed towards homeless animals. Previously, he had attracted the attention of the police for harassment and causing serious bodily harm. He got a job as a worker in a butcher's shop in early 2015. For a long time, according to the shop owner, there were no questions or complaints about him. Juan did his job conscientiously, but in mid-2016, he was caught stealing money and was subsequently fired. After losing his job, he returned to his parents' home, where his sick elderly mother and his sister, who took care of her, lived. For almost a year, Juan literally sat on their necks, stealing money, selling things from the house, abusing alcohol, and using illegal substances. In addition, he regularly beat his mother and sister. One day, tired of the constant bullying, his sister threatened to call the police if he did not leave the house. Juan, unwilling to deal with law enforcement again, obediently left. Since he had nowhere else to go, he asked his former employer to rehire him. The owner of the butcher shop agreed, providing him with a place to work and a roof over his head, allowing him to continue living on the second floor. It was mid-June 2017, just a month before the tragedy. Juan did his job conscientiously, but about a week later, he met Mariana, who had come of age and literally drove him crazy. She avoided him and never went to that store for shopping. Nevertheless, Juan began to follow her on the streets, discovering where she was going, what paths she was choosing. The second worker who lived with him also noticed his unhealthy interest in Mariana and even tried to joke about it, not suspecting that Juan would soon commit a crime. After Juan became the only suspect in the brutal abuse and murder of Mariana, all available resources were put into searching for him. Initially, law enforcement agencies went to his house, believing that relatives might help him escape. However, his sister insisted that he was not welcome there and that Juan knew his relatives would immediately hand him over to the police. She was not even surprised by the terrible crime her brother had committed. Moreover, she described how he had abused her elderly mother and even attacked the old woman with a knife, threatening to cut her open like a pig if he was not given money for illegal substances. The search for the killer was a priority for the police because Juan was extremely aggressive, violent, and dangerous to others. The money stolen from the cash register would have lasted him a long time, but no one knew how he would behave next or whether he would commit another crime after killing. Throughout the month, the search continued in the Ecatepec area and surrounding suburbs because the police believed that the criminal could not have gone far. However, time passed, and no trace of Juan was found. Soon, information about the abuse and brutal murder of Mariana reached national news, and police from across the state joined the search for the brutal criminal. Juan Martinez's photo appeared daily on television news, was printed on the front pages of newspapers, and was posted on streets all over the country with the note, "Ruthless Killer at Large." A large cash reward was announced for information about his whereabouts, as well as for assistance in his arrest, which was constantly increasing. But even this did not contribute to any progress in the case. The search for the criminal proved difficult, as he had not maintained contact with any relatives and had no friends. Additionally, Juan did not have social media pages and did not even use a mobile phone, let alone credit cards. After 6 months of unsuccessful search attempts, the reward for any information about him was increased to 500,000 Mexican pesos. Even this, however, did not help. Justice for the murder took over 2 years, finally arriving in August 2019 when her executioner was located and arrested. He was found in another state, almost 1,000 kilometers from the crime scene, when he was accidentally recognized on the street by a vigilant elderly woman. He constantly hid his face behind a hood and sunglasses, seemed suspicious to her, so she decided to report him to the police, not suspecting that he was one of Mexico's most wanted criminals. Juan was arrested right on one of the city streets, and to the surprise of law enforcement agencies, he did not even resist, He obediently held out his hands, allowing them to put handcuffs on him. The next day, after his identity was confirmed, the criminal was taken to the city of Ecatepec, where he had committed his crime. He was placed in custody in one of the city's prisons awaiting trial. In May 2022, 5 years after the tragedy, the killer and abuser was finally sentenced. Juan Martinez received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Additionally, he was ordered to pay 1 million Mexican pesos in compensation for moral damages to the family of Mariana. Mariana's parents and brother said the arrest of the killer was a huge relief to them, as he would certainly not be able to harm other girls. However, even life imprisonment and a large monetary compensation cannot erase the pain from their hearts, as their beloved daughter and sister will not return. They will have to live with this for the rest of their days.
On January 27, 2017, Carriaga family's peaceful evening in Kitsap County, Washington ended in tragedy when their house caught fire. Upon investigation, authorities discovered 3 bodies inside, all victims of gunshot wounds before the fire was started. 2 days later, another member of the Carriaga family was found shot and burned in his truck deep in the woods. This was not a random act. Someone was determined to eliminate this family. But who were they? And what were they trying to conceal? The Carriaga family appeared to be a typical close-knit blended family. At the center was John Derek Carriaga, 43, recognized by many in the community for his keen business acumen and generous nature. His wife, Cristel Lynn Carriaga, 37, brought happiness and warmth to everyone around her. Together, they built a stable home and a successful business. John and Cristel married in 2009, each bringing a son from previous relationships into their new family. 16-year-olds Jonathan Higgins and Hunter Schaap brought laughter, energy, and a touch of typical teenage chaos to their home. They were very close, almost like brothers. Outside of their home, the Carriagas were doing well. Cristel operated a popular coffee stand called Cristel's Java Hut, and she and John co-owned Juanito's Taco Shop, a much-loved Mexican restaurant in nearby Bremerton. Their reputation in the local business community was strong. To outsiders, they seemed to be a perfect family, living a happy life. However, underneath this seemingly ideal image, serious issues were developing, issues that went unnoticed by their customers, neighbors, and even their closest friends. It began like any other Friday night. Cristel was hosting friends for what seemed to be a simple, enjoyable gathering. Inside, people chat and relax after a long day. Meanwhile, John was also at home, but his evening changed when he received an urgent phone call. He let his family know he needed to step out briefly to meet someone and promised to return quickly. However, when John returned, he did not come inside. Instead, he remained in the garage. Noticing something was wrong, one of the guests went to check on him. What they overheard was alarming. 3 men were speaking loudly and appeared to be in a heated argument. This unsettling conversation, heard from the darkness of the garage, became the last clue before the night took a tragic turn. As chaos erupted, a frantic call came into Bremerton's emergency dispatch center. On the line was 16-year-old Hunter Schaap. Terrified and pleading for help, he explained that he and his family had been shot, urgently requested assistance. However, before he could provide more details, the call abruptly disconnected. What followed was horrifying. In a final act of brutality, Hunter was smothered with a pillow and then shot in the head. When first responders arrived, the flames devoured the Carriaga home, which had once been a place filled with love and life. Inside, they discovered the bodies of Cristel, Hunter, Jonathan, 3 lives extinguished in an instant. It was a deliberate, brutal act, and merely a part of a much larger tragedy. 2 days later, a grim discovery was made in a remote area of Mason County, nestled within a quiet tree farm near Belfair. Inside a burned Ford F-150 pickup, the remains of John Carriaga were found. He had been shot, his truck set on fire, and his body left in the woods. A caretaker at the property mentioned something unusual. John had been seen on the land that same day, but he wasn't driving his truck at the time. Combined with details of a conversation John had with 3 men earlier, this raises many questions. Who were the 3 men seen in the garage? The detectives discovered something unexpected. Days after the quadruple murders, more than $50,000 was found in a safe under the master bedroom bed, and $7,000 was found in a bank bag in a closet. Marijuana plants were found in a garage. The killers hadn't taken a single penny, which meant robbery wasn't the motive. Complicating matters further, according to the Kitsap County Fire Marshal's office, firewood, possibly laced with some type of fire accelerant, was placed in beds at opposite ends of the house after Christelle, Hunter, and Jonathan were all dead. Large rocks were then thrown through the windows of the house to further fuel the fire, suggesting the goal was to completely destroy the Cariaga family. As investigators looked closer, a darker reality began to unfold. This is when John's double life came to light. This wasn't merely a random act of violence or a disastrous family feud. Law enforcement revealed that while John managed a family business during the day, he secretly engaged in a high-risk operation, smuggling and selling cocaine, allegedly bringing back kilos from California every few months to distribute in Kitsap County. Some of the people buying cocaine from John were members of the Bandidos MC Bremerton chapter. This life may have ultimately led to his family's tragic fate. An important detail was overlooked. A neighbor of the Cariagas heard gunshots at the house on the day of the murder and reported seeing John Cariaga's truck speed away, with Kelly, a friend of John's, at the wheel and another vehicle closely following behind. Nearly a year after the murder, the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office said Danny J. Kelly Jr. has been identified as a suspect. In January 2018, the Sheriff's Office released surveillance images of Kelly in a Target store from more than a week before the murders. In the store, he was seen wearing clothing associated with the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. In January 2020, FBI detectives and agents announced that Kelly and associates of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club were directly involved in the Cariaga family murders. Detectives working with FBI agents developed a chilling theory. This was not an isolated incident, but a targeted hit orchestrated by members and associates of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. In their world, loyalty is paramount, and betrayal, whether real or imagined, can have deadly consequences. Although the Bandidos claim they are not a criminal organization, the facts suggest otherwise. Members of the club have faced convictions for various crimes. The range of criminal activities associated with them is extensive and alarming, including racketeering, running illegal businesses, banned substance and arms trafficking, assault, money laundering, loan sharking, contract killings, trafficking stolen goods, motor vehicle theft, and counterfeiting. In Washington state, the Bandidos Motorcycle Gang has 14 chapters, is heavily involved in methamphetamine trafficking and violent crime. In 1985, law enforcement conducted a major operation against the Bandidos, arresting 13 members on banned substance and weapon charges in cities like Bellingham, Everett, and Puyallup. This operation was the result of a 16-month investigation involving the FBI, DEA, and ATF, showcasing the seriousness of law enforcement's efforts to combat their criminal activities. The gang's violent nature is evident from a deadly shootout in 2000 between the Bandidos and a rival gang, the Iron Horsemen, at a motorcycle rally. In this conflict, one Bandidos member was killed, another was injured, and a member of the rival gang suffered critical injuries. This altercation was rooted in a banned substance dispute, indicating that the gang's conflicts frequently escalate into violence. In 2005, the criminal activities of the Bandidos were closely examined when 32 members and associates from Washington and Montana faced serious charges. During subsequent raids, law enforcement seized banned substance, firearms, stolen motorcycles, and a significant amount of cash. Many members, including top leaders like the international president and chapter presidents, pleaded guilty. Although there were convictions, some sentences were unexpectedly lenient, and a few members were permitted to remain associated with the club under strict court oversight. Now, let's focus on John's connection to the club. One of Johnny Cariaga's close friends started selling the cocaine he transported from California to Robert Bobby Watson III, a fully patched member of the Bandidos MC Bremerton chapter. It is unknown whether Watson had purchased the cocaine for his own personal use or to resell and profit off of. The friend of John's eventually decided to put a stop to selling. placing John into direct communication with Bobby Watson III as a subsequent result. When John would end up taking his routine trip down to California after this incident, Watson would follow closely behind him, ultimately causing an intense verbal argument between both men. Whatever took place during that confrontation set off a series of events that led to John's entire family being killed just weeks later. The key question now is, was John the only target, or was this assassination meant to make a statement to others as well? Known as Bobby to his friends, Watson was not just a hot-tempered biker. He was the vice president of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club's Bellingham chapter and, according to police, the suspected planner of the Cariaga family massacre. What made the situation even more frightening was Bobby's behavior after the murders. When other Bandidos members questioned him about his involvement, Bobby gave vague answers, avoided direct questions, and provided conflicting accounts of what happened. It seemed as though he either couldn't keep his story straight or didn't care to. Even though Bobby had a high position in the Bandidos, not all members agreed with the violence that occurred. The chapter president publicly denounced the killings, particularly the horrific murders of women and children. He even worked with investigators, stating that there was a clear line between loyalty to the gang and pure brutality. In the biker community, the rules can be unclear, but murdering an entire family was seen as crossing a serious line, even among criminals. Then there was Johnny James Watson, Bobby's younger brother from Bellingham. Johnny was not a member of the Bandidos and, according to available records, had no direct involvement in the gang's illegal activities. However, being Bobby Watson's brother made him a suspect by default. Questions arose. What did he know? What had he heard? And most importantly, what part, if any, did he play in these events? One of the most heartbreaking aspects of this story involves Danny J. Kelly Jr. Although Kelly was not an official member of the Bandidos, he was very much involved. As a hang-around, he was seen as a prospective member eager to earn his place in the group. With Bobby Watson being his connection to the inner circle, Kelly often wore Bandidos supporter gear and openly expressed his ambitions. However, what makes his story particularly tragic is that years prior, Kelly was among John Cariaga's closest friends. In fact, John chose him to be the best man at his wedding. It was a friendship that should have lasted forever, but things took a wrong turn. Their bond fell apart when John accused Kelly of stealing from him, an accusation that shattered any remaining trust. After years of diligent investigation, the details of the Cariaga family case finally came together, leading law enforcement to establish a special task force dedicated to uncovering the truth behind the brutal quadruple murder. This was not just another forgotten cold case. It became an urgent mission aimed at bringing the perpetrators to justice for the pain they inflicted. The evidence mounted, and eventually 3 men, Danny J. Kelly Jr., Robert Bobby Watson, and Johnny James Watson, who were believed to have planned and carried out the attack, were arrested. Their names, once merely whispered in private conversations, now resonated throughout the Kitsap County Jail. Even while in custody, they maintained their innocence against a long list of serious felony charges, including aggravated murder, arson, and burglary. Each faced the looming threat of 16 felony counts hanging over them like a sword on a thread. A judge, understanding the seriousness of their alleged offenses and the danger they posed, denied bail for all 3. They were also prohibited from having firearms, alcohol, or banned substance unless prescribed for medical reasons. To avoid any potential coordination among them, the court prohibited contact between the men. It was evident that the system was intent on keeping them apart, isolated, and closely monitored until justice could prevail. In April 2024, a long and intense trial concluded with a verdict that brought closure to a troubling chapter in Kitsap County's history. The court found Danny J. Kelly Jr., Robert Bobby Watson III, and Johnny James Watson guilty on 30 charges, including first-degree murder, premeditated murder, and arson. The severity of their crimes, including the brutal killings and the intentional destruction of a family home, left no room for leniency. As the courtroom prepared for sentencing, The atmosphere was filled with deep sadness as the victims' loved ones came forward to share their memories and grief. Carly Schaap, the mother of Hunter Schaap, made a poignant statement by placing an urn with her son's ashes next to a photo of him at the lectern. 8 relatives, all deeply affected by their loss, addressed the court, reminiscing about their loved ones while pleading with the judge for the harshest possible sentences for the men convicted. Carly and other family members openly expressed the ongoing pain and suffering that have impacted their blended family since that tragic night on January 27, 2017. On May 7, 2024, the court sentenced them to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They would have no chance of freedom. The Cariaga killers would spend the rest of their lives behind bars, held responsible for devastating a family and tearing apart a community. For the investigators who had followed leads, faced setbacks, and pieced together evidence, this outcome was a hard-earned success. It served as a somber reminder of the consequences of violence, but also affirmed that justice, though slow, ultimately prevails. To make matters worse, in another incident, in 2018, they suffered another blow when Joseph Carrega, a young family member, died in a car crash near Huntsville. This additional loss deepened the sorrow and pain already weighing heavily on their hearts. The tragic story of the Cariaga family is a haunting reminder of how deep pain can ripple far beyond the immediate loss, touching the lives of loved ones and entire communities. What was a quiet life ended in unimaginable violence, fueled by a dark underworld that most would rather not see. Even as justice was served with life sentences, the shadows left behind linger. As the dust settles, it leaves you wondering how many more lives are quietly caught in the crossfire of secrets and violence that we may never fully understand.